Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Bakari Lumumba back once again, progenitor of LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. Back once again this evening. Hope you all are having a great evening. We're back. We're doing once again a dual stream with Bequaline Network, the Pan African social media extraordinaire, and of course Lumumba Speaks. Bakari Lumumba Speaks, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. Want you all to make sure you tap in, make sure you hit the subscribe and the like button, as well as the notification bell for future updates on videos. So we're going to have a great show this evening, family, a great show where we're going to be discussing our African people's practice of Abrahamic religions tantamount to Menticide. So, family, if you don't know what Menticide is, if you don't know why we are doing this show, and what led to, of course, us doing this show, this is a conversation that you definitely want to be part of. Once again, if you're watching, make sure that you hit the subscribe and the like button, as well as the notification bell, as we are going to seek to have a great conversation this evening as we discuss our African people's practice of Abrahamic religions tantamount to Menticide. We also are going to make sure that we discuss what Menticide is, who coined the terms, give you a quick notification. Shout out to Dr. Bobby E. Wright, his 1980 treatise in which he coined the term. So we're going to go into all of that. But if you're watching, make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. Family, if you're watching on Twitter, once again, family, you could come on over to YouTube and you can take part in the show if you want to be part of the conversation. And then, of course, we're going to get the conversation started here. So I think this may be a contentious conversation this evening. So we definitely want to make sure that we are being respectful at all times. If you do happen to disagree with someone, we definitely want to make sure that you attack the argument and not the person. I do know that religion, unfortunately, for many can be a hot topic, hot button conversation in which it generally rouses up a lot of emotional views, particularly because for most religion is belief based, and not fact based. So we definitely want to make sure that we are cognizant of that. Also, we want to make sure we go with the ground rules at Lumumba Speaks. So first and foremost, diversity of thought is welcome. So irrespective if you're on the left, right, or right down the middle, this would be a situation where you could be an atheist. As myself, a card-carrying member of the American Atheist Association organization, or you could be someone who's devoutly religious or someone who's very liberal and even agnostic. This is a place where we can have that conversation. Once again, no racial epithets of any kind are allowed because we're having a conversation about religion this evening. We want to make sure that no religious epithets are used, no epithets of any kind are used. This, of course, is a space for Black empowerment. So we believe in the 3 N's of Black power, which are self-respect, self-defense, and of course, family, self-determination. Also, facts over feelings. As I stated before, this could be a very contentious conversation. So we want to make sure that we attack the argument a person's making and not the person themselves. So no ad hominems, and no fundamentally false statements. So you can give an opinion, but you cannot make a fundamentally false statement. And of course, our mission here at Lumumba Speaks is neither to exonerate or vilify, but to simply challenge conventional wisdom and re-examine what has previously been accepted as fact. And I would be remiss in my duty in terms of leading off the show if I did not discuss today's Black History Fact. And today's Black History Fact is on this day, May 7th, 1943, the SS George Washington Carver was launched in Richmond, California. Right, this was the second Liberty ship named after an African American. The first was the Booker T. Washington, launched in 1942. And many of you may be unaware, hopefully you're not, but if you are, you're going to find out now. George Washington Carver was one of America's most innovative and creative scientists and innovators. Carver was born into the Holocaust of enslavement in around 1860 in the Show Me State of Missouri and transitioned to the realm of the ancestors on January 5th, 1943 in Tuskegee, Alabama. As many of you know, he was a professor at Booker T. Washington's Intellectual Monument, Tuskegee University. And Carver was a botanist and an inventor who created more than 100 products from the peanut, including plastics, cosmetics, paints, nitroglycerin, gasoline, and several others. So, with that being said, family, I'm going to bring in the man, the myth, the legend, the Pan African historian extraordinaire, your favorite historian's favorite historian, none other than Brother Dwayne Omawale. How you doing this evening, brother? You're muted.
Okay, yeah, I'm doing well. How have you been?
I'm doing quite all right. Doing quite all right. Got a lot of work done this evening on my dissertation, so I'm steady chopping that tree down. So steady chopping the tree down. And so, it's great once again to have you on the show. As you know, this is a conversation that could be contentious. We know that, unfortunately, I've made the argument. I'm sure you've talked about this as well. That oftentimes religion is belief based, not fact based, and so there could be even be an issue of arrested development and a lack of intellectual curiosity based on the only thing that is required is that you believe rather than think. But with that being said, I think we're going to get right into the conversation, and I'm sure you know this, but just for the viewing public, they may be unaware. So when we talk about menticide or African people's practice of Abrahamic religions, tantamount to menticide, if you are unaware of what menticide, the term was coined by Dr. Bobby Wright in his 1980 article, Menticide, the ultimate threat to the black race. In defining menticide, Dr. Wright explains that it is the deliberate and systematic destruction of a person's or group's mind. With that, so what are your thoughts on menticide?
Menticide?
Yes, sir.
I think Bobby writes. Not only was his assessment very accurate, it's actually more relevant today than it was when he was alive, particularly because we live in an age of social media and quick access to information. And the
Mhm.
unfortunate reality is because it's so easy to access information now, it's also very easy to access disinformation. So
Absolutely.
we have a very serious problem with this information that contributes to the very problem that he was talking about in terms of menticide and people, especially when we're talking about anti-African indoctrination, which is primarily what he was focused on when he was writing about menticide. He was talking about the process in which African people are actually alienated from ourselves and we become self-hating and self-defeating through um, our thought processes, and that's what he meant by menticide. And we see this all the time on social media, different groups that promote very anti-African ideologies, and the ultimate result of that is just these groups don't really accomplish very much in terms of advancing the struggles of African people. Their primary focus is to run away from the African identity and to
Right.
further reinforce certain white supremacist viewpoints concerning African people.
Could you provide an example of that?
A particular group.
Yes, sir.
Well, we this is a group we talk about very often. ADOS, FBA. I mean, when you look at their rhetoric, the entire premise of their movement is to run away from African identity and to claim an American identity. But in doing so, they're identifying with a nation that's historically oppressed African people. It's a nation that's enslaved African people. And Bobby Wright explained part of the problem with menticide. Not only does it instill self hatred among African people, but it makes us lose sight of who it is that we're actually fighting against. So this is a
Mm.
movement based off of trying to get reparations from a nation that's historically exploited African people, enslaved, African people, bombed African communities. So Bobby Wright was big on understanding who these people are, and he wrote a whole essay about racists being psychopaths. So
Yes,
part of
yes,
the
he
mental
did.
side of the process is we don't know who we are, but we don't know who these people are. So part of the mental side of the process we see with these particular groups is not only are they running away from an African identity and embracing very ahistorical, anti-intellectual, ideological positions, but the whole movement is premised around running away from Africa and not identifying with being an African, but trying to be an American in the hope that identifying with America will make America suddenly feel bad and feel remorseful for Jim Crow and feel remorseful for slavery, and then give reparations that way. And again, if you read Bobby Wright's writings, you'll clearly understand that the people that you're dealing with are psychopaths. The psychopaths aren't going to give reparations just because you make them feel bad.
Right.
Yvette Cornell, I know particularly her entire argument is a moral appeal to America. She'd make the argument about how, well, America did this to black people, America did this to us, and it's your job to fix it. And again, that's menticide. If you understand the people that you're dealing with, they know exactly what they did
What
and they
they
don't
did.
feel bad for it. They're still doing it.
Right, right. Great point. Let me read Trigger Happy's post here. He says Abrahamic religions are menticide because they are not our practices and don't serve our geopolitical purposes, but rather they unify us away from each other as African people. Islam unified Arabs, Christianity unified Europe, Hinduism unifies India, this does not mean that they can't be other groups of people practicing these religions, as they are expansionist in nature. We have to have our practices which are culturally congruent to unify African people and combat alienation. Brother, I don't think a sister, right, don't want to misgender you. I think don't think you could have said that any better. I don't think I could have said that any better. So definitely would love for you to tap in and be part of the conversation. The link is in the chat. The link is also in the description. So I'm gonna share some information, and we're gonna have this conversation. But we're gonna go in chronological order, right? In terms of we're familiar. Malcolm X made the claim: keep your religion to yourself. Right? We're not oppressed because of our religion. However, I think one of the issues we fail to unpack and really interrogate the adverse effect that alien religious practices have on African people. And that's something that we're going to seek to, of course, interrogate this evening. For example, Dr. Ali Mazrui, many of you may be aware, he wrote a groundbreaking book in 1986 titled The Africans, A Triple Heritage, where he argues that, the Abrahamic faiths, particularly Christianity and Islam, seek to undermine African culture due to the fact that it seeks to replace it, right? Thus, one does not seek to replace something that is seen as good and right. One only seeks to replace, or in this instance, change the beliefs of a group that they believe are wrong, right? Indigenous religion. So, for example, when we talk about Abrahamic religions, there are a number of individuals who try to Africanize Abrahamic religions, right? However, if we look at indigenous African religious beliefs, they are anti-imperialistic. Yes, um, there are no prophets or revealed scriptures, and the concept of divinity was decentralized, right? So these are some things that we need to be cognizant of. The concept of man was not created in the image of God, nor was God conceived in the image of man, right? So these are just some things to understand. And so when we go through the Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, right, we're going to cover these things in, of course, chronological order, right? So first and foremost, when we talk about the Jewish influence on African people, it's typically indirect, right, through Christianity, of course, and Islam. But one of the major issues we find is the Jewish myths of origin replacing African people's myths of origin. And I'm talking about the book of Genesis and, of course, the story of Adam and Eve, right? The concept of God having a chosen people, right? Jewish people are considered God's chosen people, according to, of course, the Jewish religious literature. We know Dr. John Henry Clark said that if your God has a chosen people, then your God is a bigot, right? We find the falsification and even omission of African history, right? One of the central themes of the Jewish faith and Abrahamic religions in general is that Abraham was the first person in recorded human history to practice monotheism. We know that is ahistorical. Particularly, I know Brother Dwayne wrote some articles about Akhenaten predating Abraham in the practice of monotheism. We see the demonization of Kemet, right? The falsification of African history in terms of the story of Jewish enslavement in Africa, which of course is ahistorical, and even the origins of humanity not beginning in Africa, but in Mesopotamia, also known as the Fertile Crescent with the Garden of Eden. Of course, the scriptures in the book of Genesis state that the Garden of Eden was located between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which is in present day Iraq. Also, one of the issues that we find with Judaism is this concept of the Hamitic curse. We know the story the story is that Noah's son Ham saw his nakedness, and so many people may be unaware. Many people ascribe that to what a religious misreading by white Christian nationalists in the slaveocracy during the Holocaust of the slavery in the Western Hemisphere. However, we find this concept of the Hamitic curse being attributed to African peoples going as far back as the 5th century via the Jewish Talmud, right, which is the central text of rabbinic Judaism and the primary source of Jewish religious law and theology. So that's a lot of information, Brother Dwayne. How do we unpack all of that?
Yeah, it's a lot of information. The thing about African people's relationship, to Jewish people, and Judaism as a religion, it's a bit different from Christianity and Islam in the sense that because of the concept of Jews being God's chosen people, historically it's not been a religion that's attempted to go out and convert other people. The whole concept is based on Jews and their particular connection
Right.
with God and them being chosen people. So it's fascinating in the sense that it's a religion that brings forward this idea of a chosen people, which, as John Henry Clark pointed out, if God is choosing people, that by the very definition of doing so would then make God a bigot, in the sense that why is God selecting a particular chosen people and having those chosen people being his favored people
Right.
if God created everybody? So there's that issue within that narrative. But as I pointed out, there's also the reality that historically, of the three major Abrahamic religions, that's not been an Abrahamic religion that's been as destructive in terms of its connection to imperialism in Africa, because historically the focus of that religion hasn't been imposing that particular religious view on Africa. So I think that's an aspect to add to the conversation as well about Judaism. That's not inherently as imperialistic as Christianity and Islam, because the believers aren't called to convert other people. And in fact, what the Bible actually tells the Hebrews to do is to stay away from other people. Very critical of intermarriage, that the Hebrews are supposed to marry among themselves and keep that ethnic cultural purity among themselves. So it's very interesting because
xenophobic.
Yeah, so in a sense, it's a very nationalistic, almost Hebrew-centric, Hebrew supremacist type religion. But because it's so Hebrew-centric, it almost is a situation where they're not engaging in outright imperialism, at least not in terms of religious imperialism. Obviously, if you read the text, the very process of acquiring that land was a form of very violent imperialism, including genocide.
Yeah, genocide, ethnic violence, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's all in there, but not from the basis of we're trying to impose a religion on other people. It's done for the acquisition of land.
Right. So one of the things I focus on when we talk about a critique of Abrahamic religions, particularly from an African-centered frame of reference, is African people who are practitioners of these Abrahamic faiths tend to engage in in my opinion, a sickening level of racial deference to, of course, Jewish people. And I'm going to play a video that highlights that. So I'm going to share my screen, family, and then we're going to, of course, watch this video, and then we're going to unpack this video, and then we can move on with the rest of the conversation this evening.
Abraham and Isaac. Remember that story? God says to Abraham, prove your faith. Take Isaac, your beloved son, and sacrifice him. Why? Because I'm God. Because I say so. And Abraham is willing. He's very sad, but he'll do it. He'll cut his own son's throat, if that's what God requires. Very obedient, Abraham. But very righteous. But when they tell that story, they always miss the point. Who'd want him for a father?
Blacks who have never been homeless have embraced this plagiarized tale with more fervor than the Jewish nomads who created it. This perception of a so-called chosen people by an obviously discriminating and nepotistic God has led Blacks to willingly, out of ignorance of self, put their own story and culture on the back burners and seek validation from those who they perceive to be more closely connected to the God of the Bible. Recently, at New Birth Baptist Church, Bishop Eddie Long was crowned king in a pseudo-ceremony in which many of his parishioners took umbrage. Many were appalled at a mere mortal being exalted instead of Jesus. But in our lack of consciousness, we fail to see the psychological implications of this bizarre event. What Bishop Long subliminally reinforced to his congregation was not only that the Black race was subordinate and inferior to the Jewish people, but also that only a Jew was capable of elevating him to king status.
I speak life for me. I speak life. As a Jew, I speak life for me.
I got my daddy, Bishop Jakes, we have this wonderful assembly, and publicly many acknowledging how much they love them, but he got some big time haters.
In Long's twisted and religious mind, not even his proclaimed friend, who passionately defended him during his sex abuse scandal involving teenage boys, was fit to crown him king.
And I just can't believe that people would leave their preacher because he had a rat. And man, the mercy God showed on you, but you couldn't show it to the preacher. And if you from that church that you know I'm talking about, you trying to join here, I don't want you to join here. You need to go and join where you're supposed to be.
But it's more money.
A brand new scroll starts at $60,000.
That is my friend. That is my brother in the Lord. And if you came from there, you get on back over there where you're supposed to be and do what you're supposed to be doing.
Long also allowed the New Testament, which is held sacred in Baptist churches, to be reduced in rank next to the so-called sacred text of the Jew, a view seen very differently by his most outspoken defender.
Now the law of life for us is the love of God. That's our law. The Old Testament was filled with thousands of laws, I would dare to say. And yet we are only obligated to operate by this one law, the love law. That is the law of the spirit world.
We as Jews, we come there, we don't even touch it with our hand, we touch it with the finger, the authority of God, only given to one of great authority. On behalf of the Jewish people, the land of Israel, and the God of Israel, I want to make a presentation. Praise God. Amen. Bishop, if you come. There are 22 pairs of chromosomes in your body. The 23rd was added by man. Jewish doctors say when you look at a microscope, your cells of your body look exactly like script Hebrew letters.
As you can clearly see, Hebrew letters and cells under a microscope look nothing alike. This is why religion can only be sold to the most gullible amongst us.
This is done in the kings of Israel. He's wrapped in the word of God. He's sealed by the blood of Messiah. He is sealed to come out with a new anointing. The kingship within him. This is done to every king.
Yivarechecha Adonai ve'yishmarecha Ya'er Adonai hanavalecha ve'yi.
This is a scroll that's 312 years old. It's a Holocaust scroll. Because the Jews, we love the government of God. We took it with us under our clothes to Auschwitz and Birkenau. The land of Israel and the God of Israel, thank you for the honor on behalf of the Jewish people, the land of Israel and the God of people. God of Israel, I want to thank you. God bless you. Praise you.
All right, family. So let's unpack that. So the first question I have, and of course, family, if you're watching, the link is in the chat. You can put, of course, you could be part of the conversation. But I'm going to put the question to the family. Hopefully you all tap into Brother Dwayne Omawale, the Pan-African historian extraordinaire, your favorite historian's favorite historian. Would a black man be able to go into a synagogue and state that the cells of your body under a microscope look like hieroglyphics, Egyptian hieroglyphics?
Not even a synagogue. I don't think a black man could even go into church or a mosque and do that either.
Right. Why, in your opinion, were they able to go into that church and spread, of course, misinformation, reassert that God is more closely associated with them, and black people not take issue or umbrage with it?
I mean, there's multiple answers for that. The one I would choose is because the people in the church haven't actually read the Bible. Because I will start with, if you actually read the Bible, you wouldn't walk away with the conclusion that the Jews are actually a superior people, because even though in the Bible they're God's chosen people, God is frequently having to punish these people, because in the Bible, which is their book, so it's not another group of people trying to project this image on the Hebrew people. This is how the Hebrews wrote about themselves and viewed
Project
themselves.
themselves. Yeah.
In
Right.
that book, every opportunity they get to disobey their God, they're doing it. They're worshiping idols, worshiping other gods. I mentioned before, the Bible has a strict command against intermarriage. They're marrying outside the Hebrew race, rape, incest. They're practicing all of that in the Bible, and God is constantly punishing them, to the point where Israel is supposed to be the promised land, the land that God gave the Hebrew people in the Bible. And in that promised land, they build the Israelite kingdom. And within the span of a few kings, 3 kings they have of the united Israelite kingdom, and after 3 kings, the United Kingdom breaks up because each of those kings disobey God in various ways, and
Right.
these are kings that are actually appointed by God. God is selecting these men to be the king of His kingdom, and
This
these
is
are
true.
awful men, awful, immoral men, and God is selecting them. So the reason why I say these people haven't read the Bible is because when you read that Bible, even though they're God's chosen people, the Bible continuously points out that these people, they're immoral. They constantly violate the covenant that they made with God. The whole thing about the promised land was part of a covenant, and frequently violating that covenant. And this is all in the Old Testament. Now, when you get to the New Testament, and you're talking about the story of Jesus being the Messiah, well, according to the New Testament, it wasn't the Jewish crowd that actually called for Jesus to be crucified, even when
Right.
Pontius Pilate didn't want to do it, to the Jews. So, and I know that's a very controversial statement, because the history of anti-Semitism, I'm spoiling it. The
Right.
history of
Go,
anti-Semitism.
go. Hey, D1, you can tap in, brother. Tap in, brother D1. Go right ahead, Dwayne.
Yeah, but the history of anti-Semitism in Europe is actually based on this idea that Jews were responsible for killing Jesus. So
Right.
the history of anti-Semitism in Europe would indicate to most people that the European Christians who read the Bible weren't impressed by Jews. They didn't view Jews as being a superior people. In fact, they came with the opposite conclusion. They came with the conclusion that Jews are awful, immoral, untrustworthy people. But the thing is, like I said, this is how they portray themselves in their own holy book.
Right.
So, like I said, if you read the Bible, you wouldn't walk away feeling that Jews are a superior people.
Exactly. Exactly. Great point. Great point.
The perspective is a more secular historical perspective. I started with the religious argument, but yeah.
Right. So go right ahead. Go right ahead.
So I mean, obviously, there's a historical argument to be made as well, and the video alluded to this, that the history of African culture predates the Abrahamic religions. Particularly if we're talking about African religions and spiritual practices, all of that predates the Abrahamic traditions. So I think what the video is more so alluding to is this idea of African people have a rich history already. We don't need to look to the history of people who came into the annals of history after Eden. That Kemet and that's the Nile Valley civilizations predate the Hebrew Israelite civilization, predate Arab civilization. So that's part of the issue as well. That if we really value and understand our own history, we wouldn't romanticize or glorify other people's history.
Right. And so, Brother Ekumiku asked the question: does the Bible represent a factual story that actually happened, or isn't it just folk tales like every other culture have their own folk tales?
Both.
Yes, I would argue there are some things that are historically accurate, but most, I would argue, are allegorical stories that one is supposed to draw inspiration or learn something from. What many would call a parable. Right. So, great question. Now, as the brother said, I'm Igbo. We have wonderful folk tales. Correct. All cultures do. The issue here is what we find is when individuals take on Abrahamic faiths, the folk tales and the cultures and mores and mythology of those faiths supersede those of your own ethnic background. And in fact, or even argues from a religious standpoint that your own folk tales are rooted in what? Paganism, barbarism, and devil worship is a sin. So this is something that you can't get around. And we know there have been a number of African people who have tried to Afghanize Abrahamic religions, but we'll get into that in a little bit later as well. Any final thoughts on Judaism before we move forward with, of course, Christianity. We're going in chronological order, family.
Yeah, I mean, really, we could have a whole discussion on Judaism by itself. So, I think at that point, we should move on, especially since Christianity is, I think, really where we get into the cultural alienation of African people. Because as I was watching the video, what I was thinking about is, most of the people in that church, it's a Christian church. Part of why they're so ready to accept this idea of Jewish supremacy, like I said, when you read the text, it doesn't give you the impression that the Jews are a morally superior people. But I think part of why African people are so readily able to accept this idea of Jewish superiority is because the Christian doctrine that Jesus is a descendant of David and he comes from the royal Jewish lineage, and that's part of what makes him the Messiah, is the fact that he's not just a Jew, but he comes from the royal Jewish lineage. So I think Christianity really is where we start seeing the cultural.
You're still about thunder. I was about to bring that up.
Right.
I'm going to stop there. You're ruining it for me, right? So in Christianity, we know for most African people came in contact with Christianity via European Christianity, i.e., Christianity brought to African people through the transatlantic slave trade, the Holocaust of enslavement, and, of course, colonialism. On the other hand, there is something known as African Christianity. African Christianity comes out of the Coptic Christianity in Egypt, and, of course, Christianity in Ethiopia, which is, of course, demonstratively different than European Christianity, right? We see a practice many would argue of synchronism. So, yes, in Christianity, God is Jewish because he is of what? Jewish royal descent. However, we see Christian beliefs contrasting with what African culture practices. For example, ancestral veneration is now considered idolatry and is a sin. So you can't venerate your ancestors. Instead of giving your child an African name via a naming ceremony, typically after a great ancestor, or a name that has cultural significance and meaning that reinforces cultural affirmative action, the child is given a christening and is given a European name. Right? So we see this cultural alienation, this self-abnegation taking place. And of course, African religions are considered pagan and tantamount to devil worship. Right? Even polygamy is something that is outlawed. Right? So then there's a lot to unpack there as well. What say you?
Yeah, like I said, Christianity is really where we start seeing these issues with Abrahamic religions emerging. Because as I pointed out, Judaism is supposed to be the covenant and the connection between God and the Jews, but Christianity is supposed to be a universal religion. The teachings of Christ are supposed to be for all nations. And in fact, in the New Testament, Jesus tells his disciples to go out and make followers amongst all the nations. So at that point, it's no longer just the religion of the Jewish people. At that point, it becomes what's supposed to be the religion for everybody. And as you pointed out, this is where we get into the problem with culture, because when Christianity began to spread in Europe and Europeans adopted Christianity, became the state religion of Rome, what happened then was Europeans weren't just spreading the Christian doctrine, they were also spreading European culture and European colonialism under the guise of Christianity. So as you pointed out now, in Africa, the missionary work wasn't just to convert Africans to be Christians, but also to convert Africans to be Europeans. To be a good Christian in Africa was to take on a European name, to speak a European language, practice European culture. So that's where we start seeing these problems with Abrahamic religions and the clash between these religions and African culture. And that's where we start seeing even these religious clashes, because as we pointed out at the beginning, African religions are not religions that emphasize proselytizing and going out and converting people. But in the Bible, Jesus specifically tells the disciples, go out and convert nations, make followers.
Right. Spread the good news. We're talking about in the Gospel of Mark there.
Yeah.
Right. Chapter 16 to be exact. Right.
That's like Christian background.
Shh, don't tell nobody. Right. I'm messing around. Right. It's a great point. Great point there. Let me see. But Mr. Sandman states, Jews don't believe Jesus is the Christ. They don't follow the New Testament. This is true. And there's a couple reasons for that. I'm glad you brought that up, Mr. Sandman. So one of the reasons Jewish people don't follow, believe that Jesus is Christ. One, the New Testament was written in, I believe, Latin and Greek, and it contains Greco-Roman ideas and philosophies. When the Romans do what the Romans do, you eat pork, you no longer have to keep the Sabbath, etc., etc. Right. So this is seen as extremely problematic and even antithetical to what their Mosaic laws and beliefs. We even find there's a concept in the Old Testament there in the book of Isaiah and Ezekiel states that the Messiah would be a political leader, right? One that will restore the sovereignty of the nation state of Israel, rebuild Solomon's temple, usher in a period of peace and prosperity for the state nation state of Israel, and bring about the repatriation of the Jewish diaspora. Jesus didn't do any of those things. Also, it argued that, of course, the Messiah would be of the lineage of King David. And of course, in the Bible, it traces the lineage of Jesus through Joseph, who was his non-biological parent. So those are the reasons why Jewish people do not accept Jesus as the Messiah. So great point, Mr. Sandman.
Well, I would add to that though that most Jews don't view Jesus as the Messiah, but initially when Christianity began spreading, initially it was more or less a sect within the Jewish community that the early Christians actually were Jews.
Yes.
And in fact, when you read the text, initially Jesus' preachings actually were to the Jewish community. Now, eventually, when Jesus realized that the Jews were rejecting him, like all of the other prophets that they rejected in the Old Testament, according to him, that's when Jesus started saying, "Now spread the teachings among the other nations." And according to the text, the other nations were actually more receptive to that message than Jews. But initially, Christianity did emerge among the Jewish community and then spread outside.
Cool. This is very true. Very true. Very true. Islam, right? Developed in the Arabian Peninsula in the 7th century. Arab conquest of North Africa came in the 7th and 8th centuries and initiated a two-pronged process in Africa. Arabization through language and Islamization through what? Religion. We also know later, medieval period, West Africa came to West Africa via trade. Islam became the religion of the political elite of West Africa. Particularly, they would only buy, sell, and trade with other Muslims. And so this caused a schism between practitioners of Islam and even practitioners of traditional African religious beliefs. There was even an era of cultural and religious superiority because they would then start arguing that their ancestors came from the East. And so Dr. Bolefike Asante even argues in his book Afrocentricity that one of the issues that we find when we have an African-centered critique of Islam is that Mecca isn't just the birthplace of Prophet Muhammad, right? It isn't just a place that you turn to for prayer. It's also a place that is also the destination in life is to go east to Mecca, right? So something to consider there as well, family. And we also see Islam in some ways seeking to undermine African culture in terms of prohibiting alcohol, which we know is used for cultural and ritual ceremonies. Polygamy, of course, is limited to 4 wives. Islam views African religion as rooted in a time of barbarism. We even find in the history of Islam, by the 9th century, Muslims were making clear distinctions between black and white slaves. These distinctions were best reflected in the Arabic word for slave, which is abd, which of course is still used to this day in reference of African people. We know in Islam, the language of God is Arabic. You have the pilgrimage, to, of course, to Mecca. To effectively play, one must face Mecca, which is in the Arabian Peninsula. Muhammad is the last and most important prophet. There are even Arabizing customs that are important in terms of name, clothing, female subordination. And of course, there's the belief that when you go to heaven, everyone will speak Arabic. Even during the Islamic enslavement of African people, we found that African slaves, black men and women, had less value, so they paid less money for them. They were forced to work the most labor-intensive jobs. African men were made into eunuchs, meaning they were castrated without anesthesia, right? And only, I think, 10% survived those procedures. Black women, of course, were enslaved as concubines, and even black men, of course, were used as what's that movie series that Sylvester Expendable Mercenaries, right? So this is some of the history of Islam, and this was all rooted in the fact because we were black, and when we talk about the enslavement of African people by Arab Muslims during the trans-Saharan slave trade, and even by white Christians during the transatlantic slave trade, one of the justifications for the enslavement of African people, not only the justification for the enslavement, but also dehumanization of African people, was the fact that we were not practitioners of Abrahamic faiths. Would you like to follow up on that, Brother Dwayne?
I said a lot there, so yeah, like, off the top of my head, I can't really think of anything to add on what you said. I don't know if there's any particular aspect of Islam in Africa that you want to really focus on.
So you see here, brother says that confirms my conclusion that all religions are just tools of conquest and enslavement. Africans, on the other hand, practice personal spirituality. Brother Idris says, "What about Mansa Musa? What about Mansa Musa? Right. So yeah, I'm gonna need you to let us, if you can unpack, you can tap in, be part of the conversation. Let
I
me
want
know.
to respond to that first comment, though. I think I would argue all religions are political, and that's even true of African religions as well. Because I've concluded the last semester of the African politics class that I teach. And part of what we go over when we deal with the section of power and authority is the role that African religions played in actually reinforcing power and authority among the ruling class. So I pointed out that in many African societies, the ruling king was actually seen as a religious figure. For example, I mentioned Kemet. The ruler of Kemet was seen as a god king. Having a direct connection to the divine. Oyo, I mentioned the Empire of Oyo. Rulers of Oyo were seen in the same way. So it's not just Abrahamic religions. I would argue that African religions as well also have a political function. But the main difference, as you mentioned before, is that African religion is more focused on converting other people. And the particular example I often give is Oyo. When Oyo conquered Dahomey, the people of Dahomey still were able to retain and practice their own traditional religions. Kemet was the same way. When Kemet had conquered and colonized Nubia, the Nubians still practiced their own traditional religion. So within African societies, when we see one African nation or kingdom conquering another group of people, they don't impose or force their religion. But I would make the argument that African religions are just as political as Abrahamic religions are.
Right. I think another issue the brother talked about personal spirituality. From a traditional African religious perspective, we find that the concept of salvation or religion was community based rather than individualistic. So I do think that is one of the distinctions we find between Abrahamic faith and, of course, traditional African religious beliefs. But what the role does all of this play, of course, in menticide?
Ooh, a lot there. Because again, going back to what you were discussing before about Jewish supremacy and superiority. Yeah, as I pointed out, when you actually read the text, that shouldn't be the message you walk away with. But unfortunately, for a lot of our people, that's the message they get out of the text. And it's not even just the Jewish superiority, because as I mentioned before, when the Europeans took over Christianity, part of what they did with colonialism and religion was to use the religion to instill their cultural values and norms on African people. Arabs did the same thing with Islam. So the issue with menticide and religion is that often, and you alluded to the attempts to Africanize these religions, but the main problem in terms of menticide with these religions is the fact that these religions are often used to impose certain cultural values and norms on African people, and in doing so, it alienates African people from our traditional cultures and values.
Right. Very true. Very true. Let's see here. D1 Beat says religion is a soft power tool from my perspective. Very true. There is a history to substantiate that claim. By personal, I meant, let's see here. By personal, I meant it is usually localized with a clan, community, a town, and does not wield influence beyond those borders. Understood, but that still would be communal rather than personal. African spiritual practices have to be unified and institutionalized. Kemet invading Nubia and Nubia retaining their practices because Nubian culture and Kemet culture is not the same and not distinct. I get what you mean, and I still disagree. We had empires and kingdoms that are on our traditional practices. It isn't just localized. Okay, so family, listen, the link is in the chat. The link is in the description. Tap in and be part of the conversation, right? We definitely want to have a robust conversation regarding African people's practice of Abrahamic religions, tantamount to menticide. Also, if you're watching, make sure you hit the subscribe and the like button, as well as the notification bell. We definitely want you all to support the show. Cash App has a $ Lumumba Speaks. Also, you can even believe with Beacon Network, you can even leave a super chat. Africans need one religion, one ideology to unite. So I don't know if we would need one religion, but I just think that we need to be cognizant of the effects that alien religious beliefs have. And you could even make an argument that there are some aspects of African traditional religious beliefs that are counterproductive, particularly in terms of we're talking about arresting intellectual critical thinking, right? So that's an issue as well. I'm not trying to push my atheism, but I do think that what we tend to find just in religion in general is a lack of criticality and critical thinking because of most religions. What's most important is that you simply believe. And we all know, as Dr. Haki Armada Booty stated years ago in his seminal text, Black Men, Obsolete, Single, Dangerous, the African American Family in Transition. It is easier to believe than it is to think. So I would even argue that it promotes a level of intellectual indolence, right? Being intellectually lazy, because as long as you believe, it is all good, right? So something to, of course, consider. But I think the major issue when we talk about menticide is the process of self-abnegation and the demonizing of classical, medieval, and contemporary African cultures. And we know that if you're taught to view who you are, where you come from, your history, heritage, and culture negatively, what will then derive from that is what self-hatred. So you can make the argument these religious institutions supposed to be saving your soul is actually the instrument of your own damnation. Because when you hate yourself, unfortunately, you engage in what racially disempowering, self-defeating, self-destructive behavior, what many would call at-risk behavior, right? So something to consider. Let's see here. Brother Trigger Happy says, this may be controversial to say, but atheism is an African, but furthermore, what do we mean by intellectually lazy or rational thinking? I typically think of Descartes when someone mentions this point. So I need you to tap in and be part of the conversation. You do not have to cam up, and you do not have to use your real name, so you can continue with the pseudonym. But you actually, what you stated is not controversial. What you stated is a fact. Atheism is not African. I would agree 1,000%. There is a litany of extant literature to substantiate the claim that you're making. When I talk about intellectual laziness, it's rooted in the fact that as long as I believe, I don't have to be critical. I don't have to question anything, right? As someone, unfortunately, who grew up in an Abrahamic religion, I was never a practitioner or believer, but it's pushed. You have to believe, you have to believe, you have to believe. And when you come in contact with things, even in the text that are nonsensical, you're taught that your faith should trump, right? This criticality of critical thinking. You're even taught that you shouldn't question God. And if you ask questions about the religion, you're then questioning God. So it also oftentimes develops a cult-like persona. So something, of course, to consider. But tap in, be part of the conversation. Africans are likely to fight over different religions and different ideologies. It's very true. Greater examples of some of the major issues that we find in Nigeria between northern Nigerians and southern Nigerians. And so, yes, absolutely. And we're fighting and oftentimes killing each other over alien religious beliefs. And Saya says, look to the Nani, Vodun, or some other form of animism. Absolutely. So many people may be unaware of what they mean by animism. Am I pronouncing that right, Brother Dwayne? Animistic, right? Religions is a belief that the divine or God is present in all living things. Right. In fact, if you read Things Fall Apart, I think like maybe the last, starting with like maybe chapter 8 or 9. Hold on, matter of fact, I got it here on page 164 in Things Fall Apart. We see this being discussed. They give a background. Okay, Aka, you can turn your camera off. Appreciate you making sure that you're not a troll. You're not trolling. We see this concept of animistic African religious beliefs where there's a belief that God is in all living things. So as a result, all living things should be respected, right? Rather than this push and what we found in European culture where people were hunting for fun, right? Hunting for sport, destroying, not only plants, trees, vegetation, but entire ecosystems because they simply wanted to, right? So definitely something to consider there. So yeah, just these are some of the issues that I think we need to be cognizant of. Let's see here. Okay, I get what you mean, and I can agree with that. I'd argue that this is more of a feature of Abrahamic practices, whereas for our practice, there is a balance of the scientific and wisdom. Sitting the page was major. So I can even read the section for you all if you all don't mind. Let's see here. Okay, so this is Things Fall Apart, Chinua Achebe's classic text. Let's see here. Okay, so this is page 164, family. 164. It says, so main protagonist is speaking to white man, Mr. Brown. Whenever Mr. Brown went to the village, he spent long hours with Akuna and his Obi talking through an interpreter about religion. Uh-oh, here we go, right? Neither of them succeeded in converting the other, but they learned more about their different beliefs. You say that there is one supreme God who made heaven and earth, says Akuna on one of Mr. Brown's visits. We also believe in him and call him Chukwu. Please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing. He made all the world and the other gods. There are no other gods, said Mr. Brown. So that religious chauvinism, right? Idris, turn your camera on very quickly, and then we can bring you in. I just need to make sure you're not trolling, so I just want you to camera up while you're in queue. So let's see. There are no other gods, said Mr. Brown. Chukwu is the only god, and all others are false. You carve a piece of wood like that one. You point it at the rafters, and you call it God, but it's still a piece of wood. Yes, said Akuna, it is indeed a piece of wood. The tree from which it came was made by Chukwu, as indeed all minor gods were. But he made them for his messengers so that we could approach him through them. It is like yourself. You are the head of your church. No, protested Mr. Brown. The head of my church is God himself. I know, said Akuna, but there must be a head in this world among men. Somebody like yourself must be the head here. The head of my church, in that sense, is in England. That is exactly what I am saying. The head of your church is in your country. He has sent you here as his messenger. And you have also appointed your own messengers and servants. Or let me take another example. The district commissioner, he is sent by your king. They have a queen set interpreter on his account. Your queen sends her messenger. The district commissioner, he finds that he cannot do the work alone, and so he appoints Kokma to help him. It is the same with God or Chukwu. He appoints the smaller gods to help him because his work is too great for one person. So this gives Jay, if you could once again just cam up and cue, make sure you're not trolling, then I will bring you into the live. So we see, appreciate you, brother. Absolutely. Shout out to the UK. I'm gonna bring you right in, brother. So we see that this of course, is an issue, right? But things fall apart. So beginning on page 164 covers this issue. Gives an example of African traditional religious beliefs, but particularly in Igbo land, if I remember correctly, of course, and of course, how it even coincides in some ways is similar to, but different with, of course, Christianity. Brother Aka, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Please let me know if I'm mispronouncing your name. You know, I'm speaking the colonizer's tongue, and so oftentimes
you're good, brother.
Okay, so oftentimes, unfortunately, I mispronounce our own traditional names and so on and so forth. And then, Brother Jay, you can tap in as well. Brother Aka, go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's just a handle. That's not my real name. It's in honor of our great Igbo fighters that fought against the British for decades. They're called the Ekumeku. Yeah. So, but unfortunately for a lot of us, I grew up Catholic, very, very, very Catholic.
Yes, sir.
The hospital I was born in my home district is called Bishop Shanahan Hospital. So the British, they used a lot of Irish missionaries to colonize the eastern part of Nigeria, which is Igbo land. I'm an Igbo actually. So I grew up being a mass server, like what I call altar boy. Every Catholic practice says I almost became a priest. But today, thank God, I was going to say today, thank God for social media. There's a lot of awareness, and young people back home are beginning to kick back. They have this all over social media, Facebook, YouTube. We're beginning to relearn our culture, and as thank our ancestors that there are still remnants of people who still have the knowledge of Ordinary. Ordinary is the Igbo traditional kind of spirituality. And like I was saying the comment earlier, um, I don't know. I know it's about the same thing among all Africans. We don't seek to how do you say it, to proselytize anybody. We
Yes,
believe
qualified
that,
minds, absolutely.
yeah, we believe that whatever you do with your God is just, the way it is. So it was very, very strange when the white folks came, and I think it's because of how soft hearted and welcoming our people were. Our people are not kind of like violent or people, because they thought it was harmless what these people were doing, until it begins to create, they begin to win people, it begins to create, bringing in different ideas, their openness, kind of like Chino Achebe said, the white man put a knife through the things that unite us, and the center cannot hold, everything falls apart. So it was that, because like in my own community, we have um, a deity that is for the community, and the way most Igbo communities were established, it may have been established by a one person or two or three people, maybe a bunch of hunters, and they gathered there, and in order to create a community, they make a pact with the land. So the land is one of the primary deities. It's like we have an oath with the land, through a diviner, or I think it's a diviner, what they call an Afa. Yoruba people call it Ifa. Um, Tell them what possibly that land demand of them as a contract, and there is a deity in honor of that land. It becomes, and everybody, all the lineage becomes, show allegiance to that deity, and they have ceremonies, and the community is built around that. And individuals also have their own deity. For example, when I was growing up, I remember one of my clan, like in Igbo land, the firstborn son is very important. So the eldest of the extended family, what we call umunna, occupy a particular home. It's like the capital, that's where the person, even if he had his own home, when he becomes the eldest surviving male of the clan, he goes to live there. In their place, you have a lot of deities. Like in my own case, every single male that had occupied our stool had a totem carved in his honor when he was dead. And if I remember correctly, I witnessed one of those ceremonies. They bring a dibia, what they call, how do I explain what a dibia is? It's like a master in spiritual stuff. And I remember in that case, they washed off his feet, clipped his toenail, cut a little bit of his hair, and then they went to the forest, did some kind of ceremony, and then coming back from that ceremony, they cut a piece of wood with which a sculptor carved that little piece of wood. And of course, they place it at that altar. That altar has a sea of such thought rooms, which means people have been living there like forever. And at some point, some missionary came, oh, this is devil worship, this and that. All of that were destroyed and burnt. And every day, I just wish that could be recreated. But unfortunately, I don't know how we're going to do it. Yeah, so yeah, we're going back there. We call it going back to our roots, and we're gonna get there. Thank you. Mhm.
No problem, brother Jay. Go right ahead.
Mhm.
Yeah, basically, um, the point is, in order to solve the problems of Africa, you're going to need like a political gospel of sorts, an economic gospel, a social gospel, and even a religious and spiritual one. And you need like the best one, if you can find one, to actually solve these problems. And also, I could extend the whole argument about alien religion, so to speak. You can say there's also alien ideologies like communism, capitalism, which, African people have taken on. Now, myself, I'm not against the idea of taking on a so-called foreign religion or a foreign ideology, so long as, with me, it's like wherever the truth resides, wherever is the best, in terms of religion or ideology or political philosophy, wherever that resides, that's where I think we should move in that particular direction. That's what I sincerely believe. And people should sit down and have like productive discourse in that regard. And once again, I believe that if we as people in Africa do not have one ideology or one religion ruling over us, so to speak, whether that be communism, capitalism, Islam, Christianity, one system ruling over us, and we're not unified behind that as a system, then we will end up as fighting each other over this. So you see, for example, the white man, they were fighting over, you had Nazi Germany, fascism, at war with the Bolsheviks, communists in Russia. You had the Soviet Union at war with the capitalist states. You had the capitalist states at war with what was the other fascist Germany. So you have ideologies and you have white people at each other's throats, killing each other. Also, if you have two different religious systems, you could also have warfare as well. So you have in like Northern Ireland, Catholic and Protestants, killing each other off. In addition to this, you can also have problems in regards to Muslims and Christians in Bosnia-Herzegovina, two white groups killing each other off. Religion and ideology, if we have different religions, different ideologies, we will get to a position where we're at each other's throats. So I don't think our color of skin is going to enable us to develop a political ruling system, an economic system, a social system that will solve the problems of Africa. That is my line of thinking.
Okay, does anyone want to provide a retort? Ghana, I want you to tap in, be part of the conversation. I see that you say in order to be able to mentally accept Abrahamic religions, you must accept all of the atrocities that come with them, such as the enslavement of Africans and colonialism of us as well. Brother Dwayne, you want to provide a retort to what Brother Jay had to say?
I think those are some valid points, but I mean, obviously, when we talk about Pan-Africanism has never simply just been about unity of color. That Pan-Africanism has always had a deeper political, economic, and cultural base to it. So that's always been part of the Pan-African movement. And Walter Rani said very specifically that Pan-Africanism isn't simply just unity of color. So I do agree with that point, that when we're talking about trying to unify African people, we definitely need to look beyond just the fact that we're black. There has to be something deeper. And I think Pan-Africanism has always strove to create that deeper basis for unity, just beyond the fact that we all are black.
Yeah, because my concern is that how would you define like a religious ideological form of Pan-Africanism? Because if you speak to, say, like the Uhuru movement, they're like I don't know if I believe they are Pan-Africanist, and
they're African internationalists, which they argue is different from Pan-Africanism. But
right,
but still African unity, global African unity.
Okay, so with them, they take a more socialist line of thinking, whereas you'll get someone like Dr. Claude Anderson, who takes on a capitalist bent on issues, and then Dr. Claude Anderson, I've noticed, is pretty anti-Islamic and says, yeah, there's problems with Islam. But then if you were to refer this matter to, say, Malcolm X would be like, hold on a minute. Yes, we need unity in Africa, but, he would push the concept of Islam. So you have three different black nationalists talking about different religions, different perspectives. So what kind of religion do you choose is the question here, because, one Pan-Africanist will say we've got to do things this way. This is what Pan-Africanism is, because like Islam has like a scripture. The Bible has a scripture. Is there like an ancient manuscript that you can refer to in regards to what is Pan-Africanism? Like like.
So yeah, that's a good question. Let me answer that. Let me answer that question. The oldest written Pan-Africanist manifesto is David Walker's Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World, written in 1829, and that is the oldest written Pan-Africanist manifesto, where there are core tenets of Pan-Africanism, Black nationalism that are in print that were written.
Right. And is there like a comprehensive economic system, social system, religious order within that?
Not an economic or religious order, no.
Right, because I mean, people will fall for religion because we're all going to die, and we're going to want to ask ourselves, look, where do we go when we die? So, that to me. Say again.
So not all of us. I'm an atheist, so.
But what's interesting? There are some religions that don't believe in an afterlife as well.
Yeah, but that's true. But either way, unless someone has told us what happens in an afterlife, we're not going to know. And so it could be hell, it could be heaven, or it could be nothing. And you've got to have like a scientific way, or you've got to try and find out where you're going. So people are going to fall for some religion somewhere, somehow. Some will just think, well, I don't need religion. So you see, there's going to be divisions in Africa over religion. So you have to find out which one would be the best or which would be the most suitable.
Well, I would argue that it definitely wouldn't be Abrahamic based, because it requires that African people engage in self-abnegation. But I would push back against there would always be religious strife, because when we talk about from a traditional African culture standpoint, African religions did not seek to proselytize, so that wasn't an issue.
So therefore, but you would have like for example, in ancient Egypt, were the Hebrew Israelites not persecuted by the pharaohs of the time? I don't know if it was for the fact that they were Jewish, but there was slavery.
Hold on, wait.
Sorry. Yeah.
Real quick, Brother Jay. That is a ahistorical story. It never happened.
What was that?
That the story of Jewish enslavement in ancient Egypt is ahistorical. It never happened.
So was there never enslavement in Africa at all?
Yes, there was enslavement in Africa. However, what we find is that ancient Egyptians, known as in Kemet, kept copious notes of everyone they came in contact with, everyone they conquered, everyone they engaged in battle with. There are no archaeological, anthropological, even historical records to substantiate the enslavement of Hebrew Jewish people in Kemet. Furthermore, Jewish scholars have even admitted that this was a story that was a mythological story that was created in the 6th century BCE to what? To create a national ethos and pride in who they were, a mythological origin story. So even Jewish scholars admit that this is not something that happened.
Oh, okay, and my apologies for that, sir.
So for example, Jewish scholars even admit that Abraham, who was the progenitor of the Jewish people, the patriarch of Jewish people, never existed. They've come to that conclusion that even the story of Abraham is made up.
You know what's ironic?
Go ahead.
If I could speak.
Go ahead.
As I was reading Exodus, like for the last week or so, I actually was reading about how God was trying to liberate the Jews, or the Hebrews specifically, to get to out of Egypt. So in other words, Canaan. So that's why when he was talking about it, I was like, oh, but I keep forgetting, the book is not considered as like historical fact. So the Bible is not considered as historical fact. So that's what I was thinking about, just off the top of my head.
Right.
No, I mean in the book of Exodus, like
like during, well, at least the part that I'm reading, the God sent I forgot, Joshua or one of Abraham's children, descendants, to try to liberate Egypt, the Hebrews from Egypt. But you were saying just now, like, that's not a historical fact.
It was
No,
Moses.
it's not a historical fact. It's a mythological origin story. Right. It's not a historical fact at all. In any way, shape,
so
or form.
with me, personally, my religion is Islam. And, basically the reason, I follow it is because I think that God exists, and I think that the Quran is the word of God. So that's the reason why I'm actually following it. And, I believe, that nobody, I believe that this world and this universe couldn't have created itself. And I don't think it came out of nothing. And I believe, like the Quran puts forward a challenge about, for example, no one has the ability to write the way that God Almighty writes. You see, his knowledge is beyond that of any human being. Is the intellect of the Lord God Almighty is greater than any other human on the earth. So God Almighty puts forward a challenge in the Quran, which is, if this is a book that is written by God Almighty, and if you are in doubt of this, then come up with 10 Arabic words that are equal and on par with that of the Holy Quran.
Well, real
that
quick,
challenge.
brother. Hold on, real quick, brother. See, that in itself is extremely problematic, right? Because it makes the argument that in order to supersede these beliefs, you have to justify doing so by using Arabic words, not African words, not African language, Arabic language. So that we see once again the cultural, that this religion is Arab centered. This is why we talk about in Islam, Arabic is the language of God. This is why we talk about in Islam, when you die, the belief is that everyone would speak Arabic. So these things are antithetical, right, to an African cultural and religious worldview.
Right. So here's go ahead.
Yeah, actually, like last year, there was this book that I was reading about Abrahamic, like the invasion of Islam into Africa. Like, there's a guy named Dwayne. You heard of the guy? I think we spoke about it. Like, you know a guy named Utman Dan Fudio. Yeah. So like, if you read his work, or like if you read the book, or like the quotation that they used, he, even as a Muslim, because he was like known for like launching jihads in West Africa and Central Africa, and like was one of I think the founder of the Sokoto Caliphate. And basically, if you read his writings, he basically says, kind of like what Lumumba was saying, was he felt like he was a bead, or unworthy of Muhammad and stuff like that, because he couldn't speak Arabic. So that's like another example of what Lumumba was talking about, where it's very Arab centered, where you need to speak the language and adopt the cultural customs, like stuff like that. I'm just adding to like what Lumumba was saying.
Well, but basically, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that he condemned nationalism in all of its forms. He said, "He who calls for nationalism, he who dies for nationalism, he who fights for nationalism, falaysa minhum, he is not of us." So he used to condemn this as like, nationalism is as bad as biting the genital areas of your father. And openly say this to the people. Don't be embarrassed to say this. So those were the kind of quotes he used to have. So Arabic was the medium to express Islam. But however, as for like a cultural imposition, it was like not a cultural imposition, but a religious ideological imposition. I think there was never any.
Let me tell you. But here's another issue. You said that Prophet Muhammad condemned nationalism, but he actually engaged in religious nationalism. I mean, if you know the history of Islam, it started off as a political movement before it became a religious one, right? And we talk about it being antithetical to African interests, right? We're talking about menticide, doing the jihads between 640 CE and 642 when they came into North Africa. They destroyed libraries, statues, a lot of numerous forms of art. There's even in Anthony T. Browder's book, Now Valley Contributions to Civilization, and several other texts, they talk about how when the I believe it was Prophet Muhammad's youngest wife, her father became the leader of the faith. I believe the term is Caliph. And so they said, well, no, the Library of Alexandria contains a lot of important information, world history, etc. And the response was, well, if it agrees with the Quran, then we could destroy it's superfluous. And if it doesn't agree with the Quran, then it needs to be destroyed. Right? So what the French toast are we talking about here? Right? If we talk about in the Ottoman Empire, which was an Islamic empire, many people are unaware that the crescent moon, which of course is a symbol of Islam, came from the Ottoman Empire. During the Ottoman Empire, they practiced religious gangsterism. If you weren't a Muslim, you had to pay extra taxes. And if you didn't pay extra taxes, guess what happened? You were oftentimes enslaved, and your wife and children were oftentimes sexually assaulted. Because
you know about this jizya. That jizya is paid by the non-Muslim citizen of the Islamic State, and Muslims have to pay more taxes than the non-Muslims. That's a reality.
That's not true. That's
not in the Ottoman Empire. It was the other way around in the Ottoman Empire. If you were a non-Muslim, you had to pay more taxes.
No, you didn't.
Yes, you did.
If I could find that book, hold on.
Please find that book, because we didn't have, because basically we have to pay taxes on land. We have to pay taxes on property. We have to pay taxes on income, whereas they just have to pay a certain small fee.
They also had to pay for protection. We're talking about extortion. We're talking about gangsterism. They had to pay for protection.
They didn't have to. It was only jizya. That was it.
No, but brother, I'm telling you, you're a bright brother, but you are misinformed here.
It was jizya.
You're misinformed here. It was religious gangsterism. Not only, like we mentioned, we talked about the history of the religion. There's been a long history of anti-blackness in Islam since the 9th century.
I mean, I didn't know that there was any anti-black hatred of Islam. I mean, I'm not aware about that.
Okay, well, yeah, we went over at the top of the show, right? The history of the trans-Saharan slave trade was rooted in anti-blackness. There's a belief in Islamic. Hold on. Matter of fact, what I'm going to do here is I'm gonna actually share my screen, family. I'm gonna share my screen, right? So this is let me see here. Give me 1 second. I got to go through here and make sure I find the right page. Lord have mercy. Okay, here we go. This is and Brother Dwayne is the one who put me onto this. This is from Dr. James Sweet, who's a professor of African American history, I believe, at University of Wisconsin. The Iberian Roots of American Racist Thought. It talks about racist ideologies of 15th century Iberia grew out of the development of African slavery in the Islamic world as far back as the 8th century. From 711 until the expulsion in 1492, Muslims controlled a significant portion of the Iberian Peninsula. Let me see here. I'm trying to get to the part that really high. Okay, yeah. Here we go. By 9th century, Muslims were making distinctions between black and white slaves. These invidious distinctions are best reflected in the two Arabic words for slave. The word abd, plural for abid, the traditional word for slave, embody its legal meaning, but in the popular dialect, European slaves came to be called Mamluks. The white Mamluk commanded a higher price than the black abd because he could bring a substantial Christian ransom or be exchanged for a Muslim captive. The different treatment of white and black slaves reflected their relative worth. The Mamluk was viewed as an investment to protect, whereas the abd value was based on his labor and as an expendable means of production. Wherever there was a back-breaking work to be done in the Arab world, black slaves were made to do it. From 19th century Iraqi land reclamation projects to 14th century Saharan salt and copper mines, Black Africans toiled under the worst conditions. White slaves were rarely assigned such arduous tasks. They were usually household servants. This early distinction, which identified blacks as subordinate others, was not limited to slaves. Free blacks were known as abd. From the emancipated slave abd no longer carried this legal stigma, but the color distinction was no less pernicious. Opportunities for free blacks were limited to such lowly occupations as butchers and bath attendants. Thus, even in freedom, Black African performed the tasks of a social and ethnic inferior. From North Africa to Persia, blackness equaled slavery and the degradation that slavery implied. Pejorative distinctions made by medieval Muslim travelers and scholars bring to sharp focus the debasement of blacks. One of the first Muslim travelers to record his contempt for blacks was Baghdad native Ibn Hakal. After traveling through Ghana and along the Niger River in the 10th century, Hakal wrote, "I have not described the country of the African blacks and other peoples of the Torah zone because naturally loving wisdom, ingenuity, religion, justice, and regular government. How could I notice such people as these or magnify them by inserting an account of their countries? Black Africa was the antithesis of Hakal's definition of civilization. Negative cultural stereotypes were applied to the nations of Africa, thereby making racial judgments of individuals increasingly difficult to escape." Let's go. So there's a long history. In the Muslim cosmology, sub-Saharan African emerged as the son of Ham, destined to perpetual servitude. The Hamitic curse provided a justification for the increasing debasement of sub-Saharan Africans. Muslim vilification of blacks was constantly being refined as blackness and slavery came to be regarded as synonymous. Muslims came to view slavery as the condition that best suited sub-Saharan Africans. It had been an integral part of Islamic society since the religion's beginnings. Even the Prophet Muhammad was a slaveholder, and Muslim teaching associated with slavery was non-belief, making the heathen condition an excuse for enslavement, which I stated at the top of the show. Black pagans of sub-Saharan Africa were the most vulnerable to Muslim conquest and enslavement for several reasons. First, Islamic law prohibited the enslavement of freeborn Muslims. Moreover, no Christian or Jew living under the protection of Islamic government could be legally enslaved. Sources of servile labor had to be found outside of those countries living peacefully under Islamic rule. In the late Middle Ages, captives were taken from north of the Mediterranean and south of the Sahara. Over time, so once again, brother, I'm stating facts here. There is a long history of anti-blackness in Islam from the moment the religion was created.
Right. So, where's this source of information, by the way?
So we're looking at primary sources, right? Primary sources. So let me see here. Looking at primary sources.
Who's the author?
I'm sorry?
Who's the author?
The author is Dr. James Sweet, professor of African history, University of Wisconsin. The name of the title of the text is "The Iberian Roots of American Racist Thought." Right.
So where did all this information come from? I missed.
Well, actually, that's a good thing. It came from primary sources. So if you actually read the article, you go to the actual bibliography or works cited. He's citing primary sources from Arab scholars and historians regarding these things that took place in the views that Muslims had of sub-Saharan African people, considered black pagans since the inception of the religion. So if you put your email in the chat, I'll actually email this text to you.
Okay, so because here's the thing, at the end of the day, when it came to slavery in like the 7th century, this predated Islam. Now, what happened was when Islam came along, the whole concept was that if you let go of slaves, and slavery, by the way, at the time wasn't race-based.
Well, brother, first off, we just showed here that from the inception, Bruce Wayne, I'm gonna need you to turn your camera on and cue, then I can bring you into the live. I just read, we see that the enslavement of African people was in part because of their race, part because of their culture was seen as inferior, and part because they were considered pagan and non-believers. I just read it to you verbatim. I even have a lot of literature on Islamic slavery, Black Islamic slavery. This is a great book by Ronald Siegel titled "Islam's Black Slaves: The Other Black Diaspora" by Ronald Siegel. Like there's a lot of scholarly, reputable literature on the enslavement of African people in Islam, right? In fact, we find that one of the earliest origins of anti-blackness in the world came from Judaism and Islamic scholars, right? So, brothers, like, I'm not, playing stick and loose with the facts here. This is just the reality.
Right. So now the issue is like, how did someone like Manzar Musa come about within Islam? Because if there's so much anti-black hatred from Islam, because if you look at the Quranic verses, or if you look at the Hadiths, or if you look at the Ijma Sahab, any of these sources, you won't find racism per se. I mean, how would someone like Manzar Musa become the richest human being on the planet as a result of this? This I don't
Well, hold on.
understand.
Let me answer the question. Mansa Musa became the richest human being on the planet because he was the king of the Malayan Empire, and the Malayan Empire was what? Owned, if you could use the term owned, what land that was rife with gold. That was flush with gold. That's why he became the richest man in the world. It had nothing to do with Islam. He was the king of he was the emperor of an empire that was.
He was Muslim, right?
I'm sorry.
He was Muslim, right?
Yes.
So basically, how would an Islamic civilization, enable someone like him to rise to such heights? That there's a contradiction there.
No, there isn't. And once again, you're conflating economics in West Africa with what? Islam. There isn't even a connection there. The second issue is you have to understand that Islam became the religion of West African elites in the medieval West Africa as a result of proselytization, and of course trade. But those two things were not mutually exclusive. Mansa Musa would have become wealthy or rich, irrespective of what religion he was practicing, because he was the emperor of an empire that was rife with gold. We had gold mines. So that had nothing to do with his religious beliefs.
I mean, because here's the thing. I mean, he was Muslim, and he used to rule by the Islamic faith and by the Islamic.
I'm just gonna say, guys, we don't even have to go to the days of Mansa Musa, people. I mean, I can go. I'm from Nigeria, and the Muslims there, the Sokoto Caliphate, which is the founder is Usman Danfodio and Fulani, guys. There's this balance in Nigeria where they say that when they say the North, they mean the Islamic Sokoto Caliphate oligarchy. They'll say that they're born to rule. They're born to rule everybody, all the other ethnicities.
What period are you talking about?
No, I'm just telling you. I'm just trying to, let you know about this, how Islam may be pure or doesn't have this discrimination that is even within our black, it even happens among, for example, black Christians tend to see Europeans as superior, and that is what the religion did to them. The same thing applies to black Muslims. They tend to see Arabs as superior to them. And I'm telling you how that transfers to our political culture in Nigeria, where those Islamic Northerners believe that they have to rule and they have to subvert it, like it's their birthright to rule every other ethnicity.
And Oscar, I'm gonna tap in very quickly. Here's another book by Dr. Sawad Abdul Kabir. She is a professor of African American Studies and Anthropology at Purdue University, which is the top 20 institution of higher education in the United States of America. And her book, Muslim Cool, Race, Religion, and Hip Hop in the United States, she states on page 97, the erasure is made possible by the chronic disavow of Black people within Muslim communities. As a legacy of African slavery, the Arabic term abd which means slave is still used, though not uncontested, to describe African descendant people. The term black itself remains an insult in many parts of North Africa and the Middle East, and Africa is still often viewed as violent and uncivilized. Likewise, scholars report experiences of race-based discrimination faced by African descendant communities throughout the transnational Ummah. As a result, the fact of blackness throughout much of the transnational Ummah is that it is negatively valued. Consequently, blackness in the Islamic tradition are seen as necessarily distinct and diverging according to heterogeneity of black ethnicity. The difference between, say, black being Senegalese and Muslim and you being U.S. black American and Muslim is inconsequential. The fact that you are black, you are seen on the periphery of the Islamic world.
Right. So
there is a large amount of scholarly literature on anti-blackness in Islam. I would argue, respectfully, right, because you are a brilliant brother, contributed to the channel on numerous occasions, that you go and study the history of anti-blackness in Islam, then come back, we can have a part 2, and then you can have a more informed, of course, critique, and be a more an informed conversation, position regarding the conversation that we're having this evening.
Can I say something, Mundo?
Please.
Can I just please?
And then I'm gonna let you provide a retort, Brother Jay.
Now, okay. Here's the
I could go. Oh, you want to let Jay go?
No. But Brother D1, and then I pass it over to Jay.
Okay. Well, the reason I wanted to pick you back of what you just said, Lumumba, about like how you're telling like people to go look at the studies. What I came to realize, and like I said earlier in the chat when I said religion is a form of soft power, right?
Yes.
Like even if you tell people, because I've had this conversation with like a former ex of mine and like others who was Muslim or stuff like that, where you try to give them that type of information or literature or books to read the type of thing to understand the context of what you were born into, or in this case, like she wasn't even born into it; she converted recently. But when like others, how these particular religions, Abrahamic religion or particularly Islam, serves as a I guess basically what I'm trying to say is that it serves as like a soft power, as a way mentally to kind of block you from being able to investigate the stuff that you're suggesting, Lumumba, right? To read the literature, to understand the history, because it's hard for them to accept that type of ideas, that the faith that they belong to treats their race or their kind of people in a particular way. So that's why I even think it's even hard for them to even try to read that or understand that.
Yeah,
try to
and we
comprehend
kind of saying with a lot of our brothers and sisters here in the West, even on the continent, in terms of Christianity, right? And so, but like I said, Brother Jay, I once again, you might be dealing with some cognitive dissonance right now, which is okay, we understand. But I think you need to actually go and study some of the history of anti-blackness in Islam, and then you'll be able to be a more of a contributor to this conversation. But go right ahead. I know you wanted to say something.
So basically, the caliphate started. The Islamic civilization started in, I believe, 623 AD, with the start of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And then by 1924, around the 3rd of March, it ended. So Islamic history has had its highs and it's had its lows. Okay. Me, myself, all right. Now, there have been some very low points. And yes, there have been incidences of anti-black racism, anti-white racism, anti-Arab racism even. These incidences have existed, and I can't deny any of this. And there's also been slavery of whites, slavery of blacks, slavery of Arabs, and that's not good. However, I don't judge Islam through instances of history. I judge Islam based upon what is in the Quran, what is in the Hadith, what is in the Sirah, the life and times of Prophet Muhammad, and what is in the consensus of Prophet Muhammad's companions. Now, when you see these texts, all right, there's not one anti-black verse. They all, basically Prophet Muhammad himself says that a black is not superior to a white is not superior to a black, an Arab is not superior to an Arab.
So here's the thing, brother.
I actually wanted to provide an example.
Hold on, real quick. You are coming from a. Hold on. You are coming from a. Hold on, brother. You can't overtalk me on my channel, on my platform.
No problem. Sorry.
It's quite. You are coming from an Arab-centered frame of reference. I'm sorry, not Arab-centered, an Islamic-centered frame of reference. I'm coming from an African-centered frame of reference. Hold on.
Right.
Now, there haven't been instances of anti-blackness in Islam. Anti-blackness has been structural and institutional in Islam since its inception, and it still exists to this day. Now that's cool, but like I stated, that's why you need to go and actually do some review, have a review of the literature, scholarly literature regarding anti-blackness and Islam. I don't go off what someone says. I go off what people do.
No, basically, when I'm like judging, say, Christianity as a religion, I'm not gonna. I'm just gonna look at what the Bible actually says per se. Or when I'm judging Judaism, I'm gonna look at what the Jewish Talmud or the Jewish Torah says. When I'm judging Islam,
so once again, I'm gonna have to stop you because obviously you wasn't paying attention. When I was reading from Sweet's article, The Iberian Roots of American Racist Thought, he talked about how the Jewish Talmud, right, and from an Abrahamic religious standpoint, was the progenitor of anti-blackness in terms of the Hamitic curse. Islam adopted that belief in the Hamitic curse, and that the descendants of Ham, the Hamites, were black people, right? I just read to you that it talks about that individuals who were not practitioners of Abrahamic faiths could be justifiably enslaved. We just went over all of that. That is structural.
Yeah, I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that.
Okay, so like I said, I told you, send me put your email in the chat, and I will email you that article.
Right, fair enough. Just coming back onto that. Yeah. Just coming back onto that point, because I've gone over the entire Quran, and I've not seen a situation in which it in any way justifies Hamite or it justifies any slavery.
You don't have to, brother. But this is a practice that has been taking place in the Islamic world since the inception of the religion. I don't care what the Quran says. I have 2 Qurans sitting up right behind me. That's irrelevant. I'm going off what is actually taking place.
Yeah, so what's taking place
institutionally since the inception of the religion.
But
hey, Lumumba, I could provide an example.
Please go right ahead.
Because I haven't been able to fully read the Quran and
You're breaking up on us, brother. I got 2 right here. What we talking about? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. What are we talking about? But once again, I would argue that that's the menticide. That's the delusion. That's the unwillingness to accept reality.
Because
it doesn't say it in the Quran, that means it's not happening. And if it is happening, it's individual instances where this is taking place, rather than it being systematic and institutional. We find that what is the name of the leader of the faith? Is the Caliph? How you pronounce the word?
Muhammad.
I'm sorry.
Caliph.
This is something that was that was what written into law. This is something that was even written into law, that black people were second-class citizens in the Ottoman Empire because they were black.
Well, basically, now if it's written into law, then that's someone that's committing a sin, because he's now running counter to what the Quran is saying. Now, I look.
No, that's because the Quran says that you can enslave someone if they're not Muslim.
No, you can't. You can't do that at all. The point is,
if you can't do that, then why has it been going on since the inception of the religion?
All right, are you telling me that this anti-black racism has been going on since 1,342 years?
Yes.
Well, I'm about to provide an example.
I mean,
once again, send me your email, and I will send this literature to you. This is scholarly literature from peer-reviewed sources, where you have to have primary sources to even get this, to have your article accepted for publication. Right? So you have to reference primary sources. So we're not talking about what such and such told me XYZ. Primary sources are used.
Primary sources. Sources. So the primary source in Islam is the Quran.
No,
so
it's not. No, we're talking about in the Islamic world. laws that were being created, particularly in the Ottoman Empire, where these laws justified the enslavement and debasement of African people based on their race, their culture, and their non-practice of Abrahamic religions. So you're moving the goalposts, brother. You move instead of saying, you know what, brother, this is happening and I'm unaware of it, but you're trying to say, no, that's not the case because it doesn't say it in the Quran.
Basically,
the Quran says.
I mean, look, mate, I'll be honest with you. My grasp on history isn't that great. I'll be frank with you, okay? However, when you make those kind of statements, and then you can't even find them based upon Islam, then all I can conclude with that is that people can be sinful, right?
Go ahead, D1.
To say that it's institutionalized, that's completely incorrect. I mean,
no, it's not incorrect. It's still going on to this day. It's still going on to this day in Iraq, in Libya, Mauritania, Saudi Arabia. It's still going on to this day. So that is not incorrect. It is correct. And I think you need to brush up on the history of anti-blackness in Islam for you can actually have an informed retort to the claims that I'm making.
Okay. Fair enough.
Okay. So,
I mean,
so let me,
for example, real quick, brother D1. There's even we find anti-blackness in Hinduism, right? However, if I was to have a conversation with someone about Confucianism, which I don't know much about, I couldn't come in and say, well, there's no anti-blackness in Confucianism. I mean, I've never even read any scholarly literature on the history of anti-blackness in that religion or philosophical belief. I mean, that's just nonsensical. I don't have enough information to even have an informed opinion or retort. That's the reality. Bruce Wayne, go right ahead. Dark Knight, Cape Crusader.
Wait, before he goes, can I?
I'm sorry, D1. You've been waiting patiently. Go right ahead.
Yeah. So what I was gonna cite was a hadith. So because Jay was saying that we're not being specific about the citation of like the examples of Islamic slavery, but I'm going to give, particularly when it comes to black people or African people, like the hadith, the Sunan and Nasa hadith. I'll copy and paste it in the chat after I read it. But what it says is that a slave came and gave his pledge to the message of Allah to immigrate, and the prophet did not realize that he was a slave. Then his master came looking for him, and the prophet said, "Sell him to me." So he bought him for 2 black slaves. Then he did not accept until he had asked, "Is he a slave?" So that's a tangible example of like Islam being accepted and practiced within Islamic tradition. But let me I'll copy and paste the link to that just now. But that's an example, Jay, of what we're talking about.
Yeah,
that's one of many examples.
That's correct. But so Islam, what Islam did was it actually sourced. I mean, slavery predates Islam, okay, in the Arabian Peninsula, and then basically Islam has just regulated the way slavery should be carried out, and Islam does not specifically state that it's only black people that should be enslaved, or that it's only white people.
But how can that be true when Muhammad is the founder of the state, especially during the rise? How can you say that?
But no, basically, did Muhammad's peace be upon him say only black people should be enslaved, or that only white people?
He didn't say only black people.
Hold on, D1. I got this. See, once again, you're conflating. You're trying to conflate. We're talking about anti-blackness in Islam, okay? I just read from the article, and I put the link. I put the title of the article in the chat. The Iberian Roots of American Race by Dr. James Sweet, where we talked about white Christians were enslaved and Africans were enslaved. However, the debasement and dehumanization of black Africans took place, and that was not the case for what whites. Black people were forced to work labor-intensive jobs. The black women were made concubines. Black men were seen as expendable and made eunuchs, and so on and so forth. So once again, you're trying to conflate. This is what a lot of white people do when we talk about slavery in the Americas. They say, well, slavery this is everywhere in the world. So black people weren't just the people who were enslaved, but black people are the people who experienced chattel enslavement and the dehumanization and the rejection of our mere humanity. So you're doing the same thing that these white folk be doing. And you're doing it to justify an alien religion that was forced upon African people over 1,000 years ago. Because when Islam came to Africa, the Horn of Africa, North Africa, it was convert or die. Even though the Quran says you're not supposed to force people to convert, that's what actually happened.
Okay. Right. So basically,
I don't care what the Quran actually says. I'm going after what was actually done.
Yeah. So I mean, basically, I agree with you about some of the things. Basically, I mean, I'd need to read the article for myself, and I'd need to.
You need to read some more literature. I'm gonna put the title of this book in here. These books in here. And Bruce Wayne.
I'll put the link in the chat.
Yeah, can you guys? Can you all do me a big favor and put me all these literatures? I need to actually read them and I need to revise them properly. Okay, and basically, I don't want to be in any denial of facts and realities that existed in the past. But my concern is, I believe, many of the Pan-Africanists have taken on an Orientalist, Western centrist reading of Islam. The way the Arab people have taken on a Western centrist reading of Nilic history and ancient Egyptian history. So we've got to be careful about those influences.
But no. See, I'm glad you mentioned that. Trick no good. That's a nice pivot.
No, I'm not trying to trick. I'm not trying to trick. No trick. No trick.
No, because this is not a Western perspective. This is a African-centered perspective.
But it has a lot of the Western centrist.
No, it doesn't. Because all I'm talking about is how African people have been treated under this religion. I could give a damn what the West says and how they feel. We're giving an African-centered critique, and there's significant scholarly literature to back up what I'm saying. I'm giving an African-centered critique of the Islamic faith, not a Western or Christian critique of the Islamic faith.
Hey,
so
look,
basically,
give me one moment.
But even if you read the text, you can in the text itself, it displays this type of information too. Also, that's what I'm saying. So it's not just the scholarly thing; it's also reading the text. Like the example I just gave just now from the Hadith. That's what I'm. That's you understand what I'm saying, Jay? Like, do you understand what Lumumba is saying?
Yeah. So basically,
real quick, family. So I just put once again in the chat. Muslim Cool, Race, Religion, and Hip Hop in the United States by Dr. Surad Abdul Kabir, Islam's Black Slaves, The Other Black Diaspora by Dr. Ronald Siegel, Afrocentricity by Dr. Malefic Asante Sr. I forgot to put the senior on there. And The Iberian Roots of American Racism by Dr. James Sweet. These are African-centered critiques of Islam, not Western critiques.
Can I just come in there? See, because with me, what I'm doing myself is I'm not trying to trick anything. And I'm sorry if I've offended anyone, my deepest apologies. What I'm doing is, and I'm saying, here's what the Quran, the Hadith, the Sirah, and the Ijma Sahab have to say. Now, people have done something bad in reality, which is reprehensible. Now, there's a Hadith in what Prophet Muhammad said, that to free a slave is extremely rewardable. It's placed on a very high level to free a slave. So basically, those people who do free slaves, you understand me, can get extensive levels of reward. Now here's the thing, where basically it's highly recommended. That's just what it is. So and the whole concept of slavery isn't a black thing, a white thing, an Arab thing.
Once again, you're going right back to the same Western European argument, talking point that Europeans make. Well, slavery wasn't just black people being enslaved; everyone in the world was being enslaved. You're going right back to that, and you're still seeking to justify. Right?
I'm not justifying.
To find a way, but what it says is, like I said before, I don't care what the Quran or Hadith says. I'm going out through I'm going off what was actually done. The Quran said you're not supposed to force people to convert, but this is what was done.
No, but
No, that's
the thing is that there are no good words about it, right?
But Bruce Wayne, the Dark Knight, go right ahead.
Not to attack Jay personally here, but you are using the textbook tactics that Muslims usually use in order to defend Islam, and that's fine. You have something there, you hold on to it, you provide any unreasonable amount of explanation so that people get on your side. The only thing is, you don't have to look at it from an Afrocentric or an European centric or like white civilization or black civilization perspective. The proof is in the pudding. What you are talking about so far is like what Quran says. You don't know what Quran says. You are not a scholar. You are not an expert on deciphering what the Quran is saying. That's why there are a group of scholars, Ibn Kathir being the most prominent one of them. And these commentaries on the Quranic verses are called tafsirs. And they are available all over the web. Nobody has to go and sit with a scholar to understand what's being said here, because all the commentaries are freely available. Once you start reading into it, you realize whatever you are saying holds no ground in reality, because it explains the deep dark side of what Muhammad and his followers practiced. Muhammad didn't write the Quran. There is no proof of anybody.
In fact, Muhammad was illiterate, so there was no way he could write the Quran.
Yeah, there's no proof.
You did learn how to read after.
No, you will not.
But the Quran is recited by him, though.
Yeah,
and it's considered his words.
That was for Jay. Jay, nobody interrupted you. You will not interrupt anybody while they are speaking.
My bad. Actually, I think I interrupted you, so I apologize. I'm gonna go ahead and mute myself.
Right.
My bad.
So the thing is, like, there is no proof that anybody who lived during Muhammad's time wrote anything Muhammad said. The Quran, the earliest Quran, came after 150 to 200 years after Muhammad had died. This was all a recollection by other people who had recollected whatever they could, what Muhammad had said, and compiled it into a book. There are several versions of Quran, and you cannot even say that there are differences in pronunciation or harakat, as it's called in Arabic, right? Which means intonation, loosely translating, because there are differences within words and within entire translations. There are hadiths where Aisha, wife of Muhammad, claims...
Can I just come in here for a second?
Nope. Admits that her goat ate pages from the Quran, and those could never be recovered. So all these kind of statements where Quran is preserved, Quran is given by the one God, one true God, and it's universal. I don't understand. If it's universal and Muhammad had slaves, so it exists, does it hold true for even today or for the time? Muhammad married a child. Muhammad, even in Quran, there is an entire chapter called Al-Talaq, which means divorce. And it does not talk about what's the youngest age for women to get married. There are videos of several prominent Dawa propagandists who openly say that if you read just the Quran, you will infer from it that it is okay to marry a 5-year-old, even today, unless and until you read Hadith.
Matter of fact, sister, if you could let me tap in very quickly here. In the Hadith, is it Aisha? She wrote several of the Hadiths. She stated that she married Prophet Muhammad when she was 6 or 7 years old, and
Yes.
that Prophet Muhammad consummated the marriage when she was 9, meaning he was hitting a 9-year-old like a home run. What the French toast are we talking about here?
Yeah, the perfect man.
That's pedophilia. Let's keep it a buck.
Who is supposed to be
But I have another question also.
man,
Hold on, we're gonna let Bruce Wayne finish, and then I'll let you all
marries a
back in.
child. And this practice is not if you read chapter 65 verse 1 to 4, you can see that it's not specified. It talks about divorce specifically, right? And his followers asked Muhammad, what is the what is a good time? It's called the waiting period, right? Idda. Yes, I remember that. Idda. What's the idda for a woman who is so young that they are still not menstruating? So Muhammad responds, the idda for those women is the same as idda for women who are past their menstruation or have entered menopause, which is 3 months. Do you know why is that? The concept of 3 months in Islam, why it exists, is because it's a good time since the last, because again, it's the testimony of the husband that determines like when is the time since the last intercourse. In 3 months' time, you are able to tell if a woman is pregnant or not. Islam is so obsessed by sex and slavery, and Muslims just cannot get themselves to admit this. Everywhere throughout the Quran, you will see that it's haram to marry a woman who is not a Muslim, whose husband is still alive. So what's the solution? You kill the husband and take the woman as slave. And this has happened throughout wherever Islam has spread, through through intimidation, through the force of sword. It has not spread peacefully anywhere on the globe. And I am certain that Jay will have certain explanation for this as well. But there are several instances. And again, Jay started with jizya, which somebody here already mentioned, that even the Quran 929 says that paying jizya is a sign of kufr and disgrace. Kufr means disbeliever or kafir. So J is, again, however intentional or non-intentional, he is using textbook tactics of Muslims all across the globe in order to, present a picture that does not exist about Islam.
The question I was going to have for Bruce Wayne was that earlier when you speaking, you were saying that the Quran was written or put down or written down in text, but a little bit later you're saying that it did exist while following the rules. So the question I'm asking is it? Well, I've got how I was kind of confused about what you were saying about the text being valid, because all of these rules and ideas and structures, whether permitting slavery or even just pedophilia, like what Muma was saying, is all based on the Quran and the Hadiths. So that's why I'm just kind of confused on the point you were making a little bit earlier.
Right.
If you understand what I'm saying.
I think I probably did not explain right. So it was not written in Quran when Muhammad was teaching all of this. This was said by Muhammad at various times. That's why there are repetitions within Quran itself. Some of the verses are just copy paste from one location to another in different chapters. That's why the compilation is very on the topic of divorce, right? This is another instance where Muhammad was sitting with his disciples, and he was, having those episodes where Allah is telling him stuff. So whatever his disciples are asking, Allah has told him something, and then Muhammad translates, or interprets in certain way. And then while the time he's sitting with his disciples, he delivers his own interpretations about this. That's why the chapter 65, which is a much later compilation, but the narration, right? Like we can draw a correlation between this with the Buddha suttas, right? In Buddhism, when Buddha is delivering lectures, nobody is taking notes. But when Buddha is already dead, 400 years later, all of his teachings start being compiled.
Can I come in here?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Okay, but wait, hold on, Jay. But the thing, what I wanted to say to Bruce was that since the establishment of the first caliphate, which is the caliphate that succeeded Muhammad after his death, in what? Because I'm looking at it right now, it was like 632. these the what we know as the Quran was compiled during that era after his death. Not it wasn't. Yes, I agree with you when you said that it wasn't existent during his lifetime. But since then, from the Rashidun to all the way to now, where like the last caliphate, like we call it the Ottomans, and what Saudi
Ottomans,
Arabia
yeah.
is the authority of Islam. It affirms the ideas from Sharia law to slavery and all these things based on the Quran and the Hadith. So that's what I'm trying to clarify, even to Jay, to why we're giving these examples, these scholarly examples, or like for example, I gave with the Hadith of why slavery is an example of it being a practice and what it has happened over historically. That's kind of the point I'm trying to make.
Can I come in here, please, guys?
Give me a moment. I'll just finish myself because I don't want to. I have much experience with engaging with Muslims over the last 6 years, Muslims, ex-Muslims alike, and I have, frankly, become very tired. I just wanted to bring this picture in front of the panel and the audience, whoever is listening, about what kind of tactics Islamists usually play about this. And I think Lumumba was very gracefully able to address that as well. But yeah, so Devan Beats, coming to your point, yes, wherever the Sharia law is actually, well, law, because Sharia itself means law in Arabic. So it's kind of, redundant. But coming out of it, everything that was followed by the rest of the caliphates were in accordance to Quran and the Hadith, right? Because the kings who used to go for conquering, they were not the ones who were interpreting the Quran or the Hadith. They were a group of scholars who would advise them into what land to conquest next, and how appropriately what is appropriate behavior for the subjects who have been conquered. So that is how. So there used to be a manual, right? The thing is, however much of the Quran was consistent across different, how should I say, kingdoms, right, or empires, the Islamic empires, but there are like the narrative that Muslim scholars build, that it has been uncorrupted, untouched, and there is not even a single like a bit of difference in pronunciation, is actually a giant big lie.
It's the truth.
I can agree that 98% of the Quran would have been consistent, but the 2% of the Quran. What?
It's the truth, because if you get any Quran in the world today, it's carbon copy. It's carbon copy replica the same.
Yeah, because the rest of them were burned. This has been admitted by
but once again,
Turkish king, that all the rest of the Quran with variations were burned.
Hold on, one mic. Hold on, Bruce, hold on. All right, go back, and I want you to repeat that, because we would get some static and you all were talking over each other. And then, Jay, we will allow you to chime in and give your retort. So,
right.
Bruce, go right ahead.
So basically,
hold on, Jay. Bruce, go right ahead. You were saying something about Palestine or Pakistan, something. I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
So not Palestine, but Turkish.
Turkish.
The last Turkish king did admit that the last surviving Ottoman king burnt all the variations of the Quran, so that there is only one remaining, so as to not spread the corruption in the hearts of Muslims, so that they do not believe that like Quran is not the one and only word from God. This is something very serious Muslims take, because Quran takes seriously an accusation for like bringing corruption to the land. A lot of people are killed in Islamic empires, still in Islamic republics, for going against the teaching of Islam, because they are said to be bringing corruption to the land. and it's punishable by death in those Islamic republics. People who bring quote unquote corruption by questioning the authority of Muhammad, or like the word by Allah. Me personally, having read Quran along with the tafsirs, I would not call myself a scholar by any stretch of imagination, because uh, the moment I picked up the book, within like first few hours of reading, and this is personally my opinion, it's the most wild book I have ever read. Uh, but I still made myself sit through it because I really wanted to know why Muslims globally are like what they are like, why they carry such a reputation. And I read the rest of the six hadiths, including Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, so, and the rest of the four. I remember much of what Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim talk about, but not the rest of the four. There are actually seven hadiths, seven major, 12 if you count uh, 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 Shia hadiths as well, because Sunni is the mainstream or the most populous group of Muslims, and Shia are the next. Um, so I honestly don't want to engage in a conversation with, because it's very personally very harrowing. It drains a lot of energy, and the thing is, what people need to understand is that Muslims are not going to change, no matter how much proof we present to them. This has been established statistically. They are not willing to change. They are not willing because the thing is, how Jay requested you to forward all the resources. These are actually freely available everywhere across the web. If Jay was really interested, he would have made an effort to dive deep into this and like just read all by himself. But unfortunately, what he's trying to do is to like pull a rug in front of our eyes by
Yeah,
telling
please don't say that about me. I'm not trying to do that.
unaware
I'm
of
trying to
what
have a conversation. Please, I'm trying to have an honest conversation. I'm not trying to pull a rug over anyone's eyes. I'm not trying to deceive anyone.
But you are.
I'm just giving people.
The unfortunate thing is, despite
just
Lumumba
trying to
pointing out to
my
you, like he was presenting you very logical fallacies in your argument. You constantly first you started with, and there is no anti-blackness. Then you started
That's
with
correct.
Hold on real quick. Let us speak. Go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, slavery of all people was by Muhammad. I mean, Muhammad was such a powerful person during his timeline. He could have done away with slavery in one go, but he did not.
Can I just come in here?
I mean, sure, why not? But it's not going to change you. I am pretty sure of that. But I'm not here to
Yeah, I
change.
mean, basically, I sense I sense a lot of anti-Muslim, vibes from you, sister. Please, talking about you're not.
No, you actually conflate Islam with Muslims. I am anti-Islam, not anti-Muslim. I think Muslims are the biggest victims of Islam. I have my deepest sympathies with Muslims because Islam corrupted them and like robbed them of thinking for themselves. That's why there are so many ex-Muslims, people who read Quran actually, who have sat with their priests. They have understood that. And by the way, coming back to your all like anti-racism, Islam doesn't teach any kind of racism or discrimination. Again, I can cite several examples, but Islam specifically talks about Christians and Jews not being allies of Muslim, to push them into a corner when they are passing from a street. Do not greet them before they have greeted you. I mean, I can go on and on. There are instances where Muhammad speaks of Muslims.
Prophet Muhammad.
No,
Prophet Muhammad. Don't you know? Prophet Muhammad
will not dignify the person who is a criminal. And
Prophet Muhammad said, "Can I just come in here?"
No, he might.
Can I just come in here?
He's not to me.
Prophet Muhammad said,
I can specify various examples where Prophet.
"Would you not know?"
No. where Muhammad has, considered
You're not
Jews
letting me
and
speak. You've
couple of
spoken
people.
for a long
That's
time,
they have
and
to
you've
be.
not even let me speak.
No,
All right, hold on,
you will
sister.
get
Hold
your
on,
chance.
Bruce. Bruce,
You
let's
will
give
get your
Jay
chance,
a
sir.
chance to provide a
Yeah,
retort.
I'm just finishing my thought. Maybe
Okay,
20
well,
seconds.
go right ahead, finish your
There
thought,
are
and then let
multiple
Jay speak.
instances where you can point in the Hadiths and the Quran that where Jews and Christians are said to be taken as allies, but only in the later parts of Hadith and Quran to be said that they are still they will be still treated next to Muslims, because even though they are people of the book, their religion is corrupt, because they have corrupted their own religion. They do not follow their own teachings, all kind of stuff. I will stop here. Thanks so much.
Real quick, I mean, I think it's chapter 9, verse 30. It says that very thing. Says the Jews called Uzar a son of Allah, the Christians called Christ the son of Allah. That is saying from their mouth, and this they but imitate what the unbelievers of old used to say. Allah's curse be on them, how they are deluded away from the truth. Chapter 9, verse 30.
So, is that anti-black verse?
No, but see, once again, boy, you love pivoting.
Yeah,
We were
I told
talking
you,
about hold on. She was Bruce, the Dark Knight. I hope you don't mind me calling you Dark Knight. Was referencing the antithetical, the negative views of Jews and Christians as it is articulated in the Quran. And so I provided a verse to substantiate what Bruce said. Now you're trying to conflate that with anti-blackness.
No, I'm not trying to conflate it. I'm just saying basically, because they said that he has a son, then there's a curse upon them. So that's a theological issue. But Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said
that God curses them. I mean, what the French toast?
Yes, because they've done something wrong. That's why they've thought something.
According to that religion, they've done something wrong. And just because that religion believes they've done something wrong doesn't mean that is wrong. Is wrong. It just means that that's that particular religion's view. The problem with that, as Bruce was saying, is that when they believe someone's done something wrong or someone is an enemy of Allah, then they believe that they have the right to then do harm to those people. That's not
correct. That's not correct. Can I come in, please?
Yes, it is correct.
Can I come in here? You know, Prophet Muhammad.
Hold up real quick. So I got the Quran open right here. Chapter 9, verse 29. Fight those who believe not in Allah, nor the last day, nor hold that forbidden which have been forbidden by Allah and his messenger, nor acknowledge the religion of truth, even if they are of the people of the book, until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. So it states right here that you can fight the people. We're talking about physically fight the individuals who do not believe in Allah nor the last day.
Right.
This is in the Quran. This is chapter and verse.
That's correct. Now, that is a political verse talking about, Islam has to overtake ideologies from power that are corrupt and that are oppressive.
That's religious. It says belief in Allah in the last day. That is not political. That is religious. Now you're starting to try to insult my intelligence.
I'm not doing that. No, basically, all right. When it comes to personal religion, la ikraha fi din. La ikraha fi din means there's no compulsion in religion. You can't force someone to become
but there's
Christian.
been compulsion in Islamic faith since its inception. This is where we're trying to get you to see that irrespective of what it says,
there's two different things there. There's two different things there. One is talking about warfare. No. One is talking about the issue of warfare, and the other one is talking about the issue of individuals. So
but you know what, brother? I'm gonna have to bid you a good night because you are insulting my intelligence. Okay, so family, I just want to say thank you very much for coming in. I definitely appreciate you being part of this conversation. Bruce, you are always welcome here at Lumumba Speaks. I believe this is your first time tapping in. Please make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell as well, so that you can be informed of future videos moving forward. Any last words, Bruce, and then
Thank you
last
so
words
much.
to Brother Dwayne?
No, Dwayne and Dumba. Honestly, I came across you guys watching some of the shots that you guys put up. I don't remember how long I have been a subscriber, but
Okay.
I do. I just have to keep my identity different.
No, I understand. I understand that completely. And that's why I always tell people at the top of the show, you do not have to cam up, and you can't use a pseudonym because many people want to maintain their identity, maintain their anonymity for numerous reasons. But typically, I ask for people to cam up in queue because we've had a lot of people in the past.
Right.
Had a lot of people in the past who would come in and they would be trolling, right? They would put up, pornographic videos
Right.
of people defecating, and so that's why I asked you to come up in queue. But I do understand you wanting to maintain your identity.
Right. And just to quickly, like if I understand this entire topic correctly, I mean, the only reason I was interested in dropping in was I have a lot of friends from not a lot it's, because I haven't traveled that much, but a couple of friends from Nigeria, and one was from the north and another one was from the south, and naturally the northern one was uh, uh, a follower of Islam, and the southern one was a Christian, and he's a the thing that I have observed across several Muslims from several continents, be Asia, Africa, Europe, or America, is that they won't reform, even though because they have been so brainwashed by their preachers that they would just not accept any kind of criticism, let alone be fair and based in their own scriptures. They will deny everything. And honestly, it, it's not something that infuriates me against them. It makes me feel sorry for them, because I mean, this guy seemed very well learned, very well versed in whatever he was saying, right? A very good chap with good command over his language, but it doesn't mean anything when he is not able to, like, come across any kind of. I mean, not once did he say, "Okay, let me go back and let me read into this. I may be wrong." Right? Not once was he like, "Okay, I might not know about this. Let me do some research. Maybe let me come back and let's exchange notes or something like that." He's not a scholar. He's just to put it bluntly, a brainwashed follower, which most of followers of Muhammad were. Right? But again, if somebody is watching this, you are free to do your own research. I mean, it will give you a headache for a long time, but reading the entire Quran with the commentaries. But yeah, that's the dogma of religion. Yes. Yes.
I appreciate you tapping in. Like you said, and provide triggers for evolution said the same thing. That's the dogma of religion. It's unfortunate, but yeah, like I said, he's a cool brother. But like I said, insulting my intelligence, I'm reading the verse, chapter and verse myself, and he's still saying like, no, that's not what it means. They're talking about politics when they clearly talking about religion, because he says what? If they don't believe in Allah on the last day, that's not political, that's religious. So that's an issue. Final thoughts, brother Dwayne, and then we're going to close out.
Yeah, man, I was just listening to the exchange, and it reinforces what we were saying earlier about the cultural indoctrination that comes to the Abrahamic religions. Because I mean, I understood Jay's point that he was trying to make that distinction between the actual text and what the text of religion says versus how people who are Muslims have used the text. But the problem is, in trying to defend the religion so much, he's essentially defending the abuse of African people. And I see this a lot with Christians as well, that when you start criticizing how European Christians have used that religion to colonize and enslave African people, there are certain people who are Christians who would take that as an attack on their religion, and they end up defending colonialism and slavery and racism in the guise of defending their religion. I got the feeling that's what Jay was trying to do. In trying to defend his religion, he was knowingly or unknowingly defending the abuse and enslavement of African people. And you kept stressing to him that regardless of what the Quran says, we have to deal with the actual reality of what Muslims have done. And even if what they're doing is in violation of the Quran, the reality is they're still doing it. They're doing it to this day, and it still has an adverse impact on African people. So we need to deal with that issue, regardless of whether or not what they're doing is, in violation of the actual religious teachings. I think that's the perfect example of what we talk about with Menticide.
Yeah. So very quickly, family, I'm gonna bring Brother Jay back in. He says he wants to come back in and give a final disclaimer. So, Brother Jay, you're back. You can make closing comments, and then we're going to end the live.
I'd like to read a small passage. Is that okay, sir, or not?
Go right ahead.
All right. Thank you very much. It's by Carly Fiorina. She was the CEO of Hewlett Packard. She said there was in the world. It was able to create a continental superpower that stretched from east to west. One of its languages became much of the bridge between peoples of 100 lands, and the civilization was driven by anything. It was driven by invention. Its architects designed buildings that defied gravity. Its mathematicians created the algebra and the algorithms that would enable the building of computers. Its writers wrote stories of courage, and its civilization kept the knowledge of previous civilizations alive. Western civilization shares many of these traits of the Islamic world. And, although we're unaware of our indebtedness to this other civilization, its gifts are very much part of our heritage. The technology industry would not be able to thrive without contributions of Arab mathematicians. So these, I'm sorry, I'm unable to read it all out properly. The fundamental problem is this.
But what's the point that you're trying to make?
The point I'm trying to make is she has a completely different perspective from, say, the scholars you've read out. And her perspective is she over glamorizes the Islamic civilization from 1,442 years. While she does state that there were instances of, malpractice. Now, my sincere apologies if I in any way I was trying to defend the bad practices of what Muslims have done. I have my deepest apologies in that. I wasn't trying to do any of this. What I was trying to say is, if you go to different scholars, go to different people, they give you different perspectives.
You're breaking up. You're breaking up.
Hear me now. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Right. So basically, what I'm saying is that there's a 1,342 year history, and so there have been instances where there's been wickedness done to white people, black people. Stop.
No, because you're going down. We're not talking about what happened, about a history of anti-blackness in the Islamic world that is structural, institutionalized, and codified. That's what we're talking about. The lady that you quoted is not an Islamic scholar. In fact, when she made that speech, she was actually reading the speech that was written by a 14-year-old. So you're still seeking to what? Engage in subterfuge and not accept the fact that there is a history of anti-blackness in Islam that has been codified and structural and institutional in nature. That's the reality of the situation. We gave you the literature that you could read, the scholarly literature that you could read.
Can you put that literature? Can you put it in? Can you put that literature in the in the chat so that I can?
I already did. Here it go right here. Islam's Black Slaves, the Other Black Diaspora, Afrocentricity by Dr. Malefic Asante, Muslim Cool, the race, religion, and hip hop in the United States, and what was the last one? The Iberian Roots of American Racist Thought by Dr. James Sweet. This is the third time I've done this.
All right, thank you very much. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read over this because obviously I'm not aware of that particular part of the history. My perspective has been that Islam had been extremely good for Africa. That's what I was taught.
And that is a misnomer. That is a misnomer. And so that's why I was saying that this is the menticide, because as a result of being an adherent, and as Bruce would say, the Dark Knight would say, a blind follower of the faith, you receive a master narrative and not the actual historical truth regarding what's taking place. For example, real quick, Bruce, for example, Bilal, the first caller of prayer, was a black man, and he was a what? In the Islamic narrative, you're taught that he was a companion of Prophet Muhammad, but in reality, he was enslaved by Prophet Muhammad.
No, he wasn't enslaved by Prophet Muhammad. He was enslaved. No, he was enslaved before Muhammad. Before Muhammad.
He purchased him. And he purchased him.
He was
purchased him
before, but he was slave up until Muhammad finally released him. Muhammad
in an Islamic slavery, in Islamic slavery, the only way that you could even possibly be manumitted was by adopting the religion of your enslaver, which is Islam.
Exactly.
No, that's not correct.
It reinforces Islamic superiority.
That's not correct.
That is correct. Well, once again, you just say, hold on, Brother Jay. You just stated that you were unaware of this history. So then how can you then, with a straight face, then say that that what we're saying is incorrect when you just said you had no knowledge of it?
No, basically, I have some. Wait, brother. I think you've misunderstood. You've misunderstood. Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Only you understand and everybody else misunderstood. That's fine. That's why I
no.
Huge.
Oh yeah, we don't want to do personal attacks, Bruce. We don't want to do personal attacks.
Right. Okay, that's fine. The thing is that the person you took name of and the good lady from here, right? He wrote a book where he himself was a man of great integrity, where he in fact named the book that he authored Al-Jam wal Tarif Ibn Hisab al-Hind. Al-Hind means India. He was actually writing a book about human numerals. The thing is, why these numbers are known as Indo-Arabic or Arabic Hindu numbers is because Arabics were the people who took it to Europe, right? And that's fine. That's a complete legitimate exchange to do, and we are fine to share that heritage with our Arab world. The thing is, Arabic was spoken way before Muhammad ever existed, and whatever the golden era or the Arabic Spring that you were talking about has nothing to do with Islam or Muhammad. In fact, even during the Arab Spring, Quran was open for criticism, and a lot of scholars did criticize Islam and its interpreters and its interpretations, until a certain person in I think the 10th century, he decided that no, Quran is supposedly the word of God and nobody should question its authority. And from there, it all went downhill.
Right. So here's the thing. There were a group of Jewish linguistics in the Arabic language. Can I finish, please? There were a group of also Christian linguistics in the Arabic language. They tried to take up the challenge of the Quran to come up with 10 words like that of the Quran, and all of them failed miserably. And they said that this here book cannot have come from a human being. This is a divinely ordained source.
Now, once again, you're trying to proselytize. Hold on. Everybody stop talking. Please, everybody stop talking. Bruce, once again, what we're not going to do on my platform is proselytize for a particular religion. That doesn't happen. We're here to talk about anti-blackness and Abrahamic faiths and why and how it's tantamount to menticide. We're not going to do that. I'm not going to allow space for that on my platform.
Okay. Now, can I just finish my point? Okay, so can I finish my point? You've raised a lot of information that, I mean, some of which I'm aware and a lot of which I'm not aware of. So obviously I'm going to do my reading in that regard, because my previous understanding was that the 1,342 year civilization was the greatest in the world. That was my understanding. And that Africa under Islam became economically powerful and economically strong as a result. Now, the issue of slavery was the type of slavery that was practiced in Islam was different to the chattel slavery of America. In that, like the rules
Well,
were completely
actually,
different.
no, because many scholars argue that the enslavement of African people were treated worse under Islamic enslavement than they were under Western Christian enslavement in the Americas. But if you could even believe such a thing, they literally make that argument.
Also,
Go ahead, Dwayne.
I would add the same article that you've been recommending by Sweet on the Iberian roots of American racist thought. That article actually makes the argument that racial chattel enslavement in the Americas was influenced by racial chattel enslavement from the Islamic world.
Exactly.
Like in the Islamic world, basically, a female slave owner was able to marry her male slave, and a male slave owner was able to marry his female slave. Now, you could never do that in America. I mean, you were not allowed to put more of a burden upon the slave, more than the slave could actually bear. The reason, what happened was...
Hold on. That in itself is subjective. That's subjective because we know that in Islamic enslavement, black men were made eunuchs, meaning their testicles were cut off, and then they were made to guard the harems of the Islamic enslavers. So once again, and we know that 90% of the black men who were forced to become eunuchs did not survive the actual surgery or process of becoming a eunuch. So once again, that in itself is subjective. So we are not going to allow space for what I just have to say is subterfuge. Brother Bawana, go right ahead. You tapped in late. What say you?
Yeah, I did tap in late, and I'm listening to the conversation. It's a very interesting conversation. Dwayne, I need to talk to you about that Bob Marley article you wrote in the Medium, but that's neither here nor there. Jay, I want to ask just a few questions. I'm not attacking you. I'm not attacking your faith. I was just listening to a discussion the other day, and I heard a gentleman who used to be a Muslim. He said some things that really was shocking me, and it really had to do with this particular argument in terms of Islam and anti-blackness. He said that there is a hadith that says that Muhammad once said that if you want to see the face of a devil, look at an Ethiopian woman. I'm wondering if that hadith actually exists, or he said that they consider it as a weak hadith, but he said that is an actual quote from the Prophet Muhammad, and I'm asking if that actually in fact existed. That's the first question I have for you. The second question I have for you is let me ask you the two other questions. The second question I have for you is in terms of the Kaaba. They said that the explanation for the reasons of the Kaaba being black is because of the sins of the Muslims. So I'm saying that is that an actual thinking, with the Muslims? They consider because the sins are projected onto the Kaaba, so it automatically turned black. That's, to me, that's interpreted as a little bit of anti-blackness. The last question I have is there was a final question where the gentleman suggested that on the day of judgment, in determining who will enter heaven and who will not be going to Jannah, the faces of the people who are going to Jannah will be white, and the people who are not going to Jannah are going to be black. So this is the reason why black people won't be permitted to enter into. To me, that's a degree of anti-blackness. So I'm asking with the greatest respect whether these kinds of ideas actually existed or these guys were just falsifying this kind of information. As a Muslim, I'm asking you that question and see if that's verifiable.
Right. So the first one about the hadith, that's fabricated. All right. The second one about the Kaaba, that Kaaba, like in Mecca, was pre-Islamic. That was there before Islam, and it was always black anyway. So it's not about, the sins of the people coming on there. There's no reference that I know of. There's no reference at all in that regard. And the final one is this: you're going to be going to paradise or hell based upon your level of piety, based upon your good conduct. Islam says that, the white is not superior to the black is not superior to the white, the Arab is not superior to the Arab, and the Arab is not superior to the non-Arab. So basically, people will practice wickedness. I acknowledge and I accept that, and it is wrong. However, when I look at the Quran, it doesn't actually justify this. So anyone who has practiced any kind of oppression of like, cutting the balls off of people and that, they're going to be held to account for that. They're going straight to hell for that. I mean, they're not going to be rewarded.
Very quickly, family, I apologize. You all hear a siren in the background. There's a tornado warning where I'm living right now. So that's the issue. But D1 Beat says, Brother Bawana, it is true, and he's looking to find a citation right now. Bruce, what do you say? Is the hadith, does that scripture exist, or that the hadith exists where Prophet Muhammad makes that claim? Well, so let's see here. D1 Beast has it here. You should listen to and obey your ruler, even if he has an Ethiopian. He was an Ethiopian slave whose head looks like a raisin.
Right. So the first,
That's correct. That's correct.
The face of the devil, that doesn't exist. And
Okay.
honestly, most of the hadiths are classified between three major classifications called Sahih, Hasan, and Daif. Daif is usually debated. It's called.
And don't forget Mutawatir as well. Mutawatir.
Right. Hasan is something that they say that it's, like, again, none of the hadith is completely false, like 100%, right? Because these are all recollection of various followers during the time of Muhammad and after the time of their own time, because it was, carried forward orally. So, for example, Bukhari isn't actually the author. Bukhari's followers are the author of Sahih Bukhari. But yeah, that particular hadith doesn't exist. The second one that like most Muslims try to provide this as the second one, what our brother just shared. You should listen and obey even if you're a ruler. So saying that, anybody can be a ruler. But the thing is, Quran and Hadiths are so full of contradictions, right? And I am not saying this. Again, I encourage everyone to go read. There are several websites where you can read this. Something would be being said in one chapter, or not even one chapter, just 2 verses before, and just 2 verses later, you are now, faced with a dilemma of how to interpret it, right?
Can you give an example?
All right, 9:5, right, where it says that if you
Very quickly, so are you saying chapter 9, verse 5 in the Quran, or 9:5 in the Hadith?
No, Quran.
Okay.
Right. So where it says, like, if you spare an innocent life, it's like you have spared the entire mankind, right? You have saved the entire mankind. What they don't specifically tell you about is that Muhammad is actually narrating this as it was ordained, or it was narrated to the children of Israel, right? So Israel was a king of Judea, right? So this is being told to people who are followers of, or children of Israel, or followers of Judah, like Jewish faith. This saying is not for Muslims, right? Like, this
It is for Muslims.
No, you cannot keep interrupting, right? So this is not said as a universal value. They sugarcoat it, they cherry pick it, but they intentionally leave out the the ayah before that, which clearly mentions that this teaching is not or was for a very specific community, and hence not applicable to the followers of Muhammad or Muslims in reality. But these are one of the uh, many things that they want to play with. To be fair with you, this 7142, if you read in its entirety, it won't really tell you that, oh, Muhammad is telling everybody to treat each other equally. It's definitely not like that. There are classifications, just like like all societies, but there are harsher classifications because some of them are considered to be subhumans who do not deserve equal human rights when it comes to that. And also, like I said, like they are forced to pay jizya or convert to Islam if you don't want to pay jizya. And like I said, in hadith itself, and this is not something very controversial, the hadith itself said that the like the payment of jizya is a sign of disgrace, right? So I mean, I don't know how Jay is going to spin this off again. I'm, I'm pretty sure he can take a like a spin at it, but people who are listening to this or are free to do their own research.
So I've got to come back in about a moment. Sorry about this. My battery's dying.
That's quite all right. So I have, chapter 9, verse 5 in front of me. It says, but when the forbidden months are past, then fight and slay the pagans, wherever you find them, and seize them, beleaguer them, and lie in wait for them in even stratagem of war. But if they repent and establish regular prayers and practice regular charity, then open the way for them, for Allah is oft forgiving and most merciful. So we see here in this, of course, scripture is telling them to what? Kill the polytheists, kill the pagans.
And this is specifically about the Arabic pagans who used to live in the subcontinent, in the region, and the Kaaba, right, was also the prayer place for pagans during that time.
It's also problem. Sorry for interrupting, but it's also problematic for other polytheists as well, because our Africans had a lot of polytheism, or well, perceived polytheism. So now
Right.
that scripture would be applicable to them as well.
Right.
Right.
This is
Oh
this is
man.
something that most Muslims conveniently hide or don't want to admit. And then honestly, like I don't want to be demeaning of them, but the brainwash in Islam is that effective. They will show you that they are welcoming you into a legion, but actually they are making you not think for yourself. And it's not just one encounters, 10 encounters, or 100 encounters. I have had like multiple hundreds of encounters, if not thousand, of with such people. My best friend used to be a Muslim for a very long time. That he was my only friend. But then like once you start noticing a pattern, it's very difficult to like let go of it, because once you see something, you can let go of it, saying, okay, it's a one-off thing. But you keep noticing it, and again, I I don't want to overreach. This is not a discussion about Islam in itself. This is about the overreaching impact of Abrahamic religions in general. And like Devon Beach was also saying, like we should talk about Christianity and Judaism. From my reading of Judaism, there is no explicit discrimination against people of, so-called races. I honestly don't think there are different races. But the thing is, the Orthodox Jews today.
Real quick, there actually is a history of anti-blackness in Judaism.
Oh, okay. I'm not aware. I am not aware.
But once
But I
again, you
am aware.
qualified that by saying that you were unaware. You didn't say it didn't exist. You just said you were unaware. So that's you qualified your statement.
Right, right. So, but I do know that Orthodox Jews who are present now would not take Jews from other regions of the world as to be one of them just because they are, brothers in faith. They are very protective about their religion, something that can be attributed to the various atrocities that have happened with them over the period of time. That's why they are a very protective, very shielded, or they want to be a very shielded society. Uh, but yeah, I am not aware if in the past it ever happened, but it does happen in the modern day. So, for example, the Jews from Iran and India, they are not treated to be very well in Israel or by the rabbis in Israel.
Or Ethiopians, by the way.
Sorry.
Or Ethiopians. They're the beta Israelis who went from Ethiopia to Israel right now. They are also not treated well as well. They
Oh,
do not have roles of even decision making in the country itself. So they are also not treated well. I just really wanted to put that in the mix as well.
okay, okay,
Right.
yeah,
And part of the anti-blackness I talked about with Judaism is one, the falsification of African history, right? The narrative that Abraham was the first to practice monotheism in human history, the falsification of African history, the demonization of ancient Kemet, the story of Jewish enslavement. All these things are ahistorical. In the Bible and Judaism, it places the birthplace of humanity in the Garden of Eden, which is in present-day Iraq, known as Mesopotamia and the Fertile Crescent. However, we know humanity began in Africa, right? That the belief that in Judaism is that there is a God has a chosen people, right? We find throughout the Old Testament in the Bible that whenever Jewish people came in contact with non-believers, God told them to kill them all, men, women, and children, oftentimes even their livestock in the booty of war. So we find that this, of course, is antithetical, right? So just something to, of course, be cognizant of.
I wanted to add
The Abrahamic. Go ahead, I'm gonna let you go right now. The Abrahamic God is a genocidaire, no doubt about it. He is a psychopath.
I would argue he's a sadist.
I would. It's a genocidaire, and if people want to ignore that reality, which is fine, belief is something, then reality. So we having two different discussions. And like I say, I am not gonna attack a believer. Neither am I gonna attack a true believer. You know, they have their beliefs, but when we talking in terms of reality or history or certain things as practical, then the believers, the true believers, can't necessarily get in the conversation. It can't be in the conversation. It is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, with me, I'm willing to like listen to and read the literature that Lumumba has actually sent me in order to revise my perspective on Islamic history. But my point has always been is that, you know, what I was believing was that the history that Lumumba was citing was like at certain periods in time. I did not believe that it was like throughout the 1,342 years. And I always thought that the concept of a man like Mansa Musa, who believed in Islam, who had Islamic civilization, and who promoted Islam, could actually come from Africa. So basically, you know, and my historical
hold on, real quick. It wasn't an Islamic civilization. It was an African civilization in which the elites of the society practiced Islam.
It was an Islamic civilization.
No, it was an African civilization.
It was not Islamic. If you actually read the Quran Fuga, which was the constitution of Mali, it was not an Islamic constitution. It was a traditional African constitution. Mali didn't have Sharia law.
It was Sharia law Islamically, wasn't it?
It wasn't. There was a separate constitution, the Quran Fuga. It was the constitution of Mali.
Based upon the Quran and Hadith, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't based upon the Quran.
So basically, it was based upon, you're saying, non-Islamic African political traditions.
Because here's the thing: when you talk about Mali, Mali wasn't the first major civilization in that region of West Africa. Ghana predated Mali, so there was already a history of powerful empires in that region of West Africa before Mali. So Mali was really building on Ghana, and as Lumumba said, the ruling class of Mali were Muslims, but it was still, for the most part, an African society, and the structural laws of Mali were not Sharia law. The Kurkan Fuga, if you read it, it's actually a constitution that is separate from Islamic law. It's its own constitution.
And you're saying it's not based upon Islamic law. Can you give me references for that? Please give me references for that as well. I need references for that.
Well, all you got to do is read it for yourself.
You can find it online. You can read it.
I'll do that. I'll have to recheck because my previous understanding was it was 100% pure Sharia law. I'll have to check and reaffirm that.
And let me ask you this: where did you get that information from? That it was 100% Sharia law.
Well, I mean, I got that information from various Muslim scholars, but I'm going to have to recheck that again.
So what that means is they lied to you. That's what that means. They lied to you.
So you're saying that the economic system, the social system, the political order wasn't based upon Islam at all?
Correct. And we just told you this. We just told you this. And for some reason, like I say, I'm about to put it in the chat. So
yes. Please.
So what you need to do, here we go. You need to go. You could go online. You could read it for yourself.
I'll do that.
Do you think economic policies only came after the advent of Islam or Muhammad?
Say again?
No, like economic anything, like the basic economies of the world, trade, and all of this stuff came with Islam or Muhammad?
Well, basically,
do you not believe that like people are capable of doing these things? Make
I mean,
judgment, observations, trade.
Well, from an Islamic standpoint, anything prior to the creation of Islam is considered barbarism. Or Yahilali, I can't pronounce it correctly, but it's considered the time of barbarism, pre-civilization.
No, but
sorry, say that again.
Yeah, I'm gonna type it in the chat.
Right. So basically, there has been trading throughout history. That's correct. But Islam had its own particular perspective and its own particular view on trading, commerce, banking, finance, the economy. It had its own particular perspective and view. I mean, it had its own definition of private property, public property, state-based property, the forbidding of usury. It had the concept of the redistribution of wealth to the point where people can have food, clothing, shelter, health, education, and housing. It had a policy of open markets, competition, profit motives. All of this. It was a mix. It was like a mix between the best aspects of socialism and the best aspects of capitalism, and it predated capitalism and it predated socialism. So it had all of these aspects there.
Right, but as we stated, the historical facts are what?
It's based
the Malayan
upon
Empire was not based on Islamic law. The constitution of the Malayan Empire in medieval West Africa was not an Islamic. It was not based on the Islamic law. It was not based on Sharia law. So, like I said, the Islamic scholars that told you this lied to you.
Okay, what was it based on? Africa. What was the? Was it based
on African political systems?
What was the African political ruling system called again?
Well, I just put it in the chat, brother.
No.
Okay,
it's right there.
So his argument is,
you need to read it for
if you
yourself.
cannot provide a label on that economic practice, it didn't exist.
No, I'm not saying that at all.
No, but you are implying it.
I'm not implying it. I'm asking a question, and he's given me an answer in the chat.
Okay, very good. So, Dwayne, what was it? D1 Beats wants to hear what. Don't forget what Dwayne wanted to hear what you had to say. You was going to say something.
Oh yeah, actually, I went back and checked the chapter and verse you were quoting from the Quran.
Yes.
And the thing is, the full context actually is referring to treaties with the polytheists, Well, I was looking through it. It was interesting because it was saying how the Prophet Muhammad was encouraging his followers to abide by the treaty that they had with polytheists up until the end of the term of the treaty. So it leaves it up to interpretation what's to happen to the polytheists who had treaties with the Muslims after the treaties were finished. But the other part that I noticed through reading through that section is very condescending towards the polytheists, because it mentions how polytheists do come to Muslims for protection. The Muslims are supposed to take them under the protection, teach them about Allah, because the polytheists don't have proper wisdom.
Right. So
Can
we
I
see
just
once
say,
again the DVD religious chauvinism.
right, can I just say, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that anyone who harms a non-Muslim citizen of the Islamic State, it's as though they've harmed me, and I will argue against him on the day of judgment. Sorry for my proselytization. The point is that there's no
It doesn't matter what
Muslim.
he said. We're going off what's actually done, brother. This is an example of Menticide. We've hammered this home for almost 3 hours. It doesn't matter what the text says. We're going off what the history that's been done to African people since the inception of religion that's still taking place today.
Well,
so
basically,
so brother Jay, this is what I want you to do.
Yep.
You have the information. We provided it in the chat. I'm asking you. I'm almost excoriating you to what? Read the literature, study the history of anti-blackness and Islam, and then you could send me a message on my platform here on YouTube, and then we will have a part 2 to this conversation. Does that work for you?
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
It does. So basically, okay then. So, and this is all going to be on the comments once this show finishes, isn't it?
But I already put it in the comments, brother. You could go in the comments right now and write the titles down to these books.
Okay.
Have you done that yet?
I'm doing it now.
Okay, very good.
Thanks, man.
There's a satire channel on YouTube that goes by the name SYETEN, Satan, right? Like it's a wordplay at shaitan or Satan. That guy, if you try to search for him, his channel won't pop up outrightly. But it has a lot of like satire material on like how people who want to propagate Islam talk in a certain fashion and try to like put down your argument in a certain way. If you're in a mood for like in a light mood and you want to laugh,
I think
probably
what it is basically the Muslim. They're saying, look, this.
We're done. Brother Dwayne, appreciate you for stopping in once again. Everybody give a virtual clap for Brother Dwayne, the Pan-African historian extraordinaire. He's written over 27 books on the history of African and Afro-Caribbean people. He is your favorite historian's favorite historian. He's my teacher. Now I would even argue my ideological big brother in Pan-Africanism, because he's taught me like I've learned a lot from him. He's learned a little from me, but I've learned a lot from him. And appreciate you. The Dark Knight for tapping in. You're always welcome here. Lumumba Speak. Same with you, Brother Jay. Until next time, y'all know what to do. Peace.
Thank you very much, Dwayne, for being very patient with me. I really appreciate your patience. And I'm sorry if I've offended anyone or come up with any disrespect, or if I've come across as being disingenuous. I mean, it was just me putting forth my religious perspective on, the issue of Africa. My apologies.
Can I find you elsewhere, like maybe on Instagram?